Now, when we get from pre-matter, liquid light, we go down to what's called etheric matter density. Corresponds to D7, 8, and 9. D7, 8, and 9 are, again, another set of 3 scalar wave grids, light bulb sequences, flashing on and off flash line sequences. Okay? These 3 are flashing a little bit slower. Now notice, there's a slowing of the flash lines as they come down. The primal light fields have constant on light bulbs. They don't even flash, they're just on in your face all the time. Then you have these here. They begin the flashing on and off process. But these are the fastest flash on and off, right here. It's really fast pulse. As matter solidifies, or the reality fields that matter takes place in solidify, it goes into what's called etheric matter density, which they slow a little bit more. As the pulses slow a little bit more, the matter densifies a little bit more. In D7, 8, and 9, harmonic universe 3, it is an etheric matter field. If you saw an etheric matter being, it would look ghostly to you. It would have form differentiation much more than a liquid light being would, because they tend to all look the same. Okay. But it would still be very ghost-like, but not like a ghost that looks just like your Uncle John that passed on. It wouldn't have that much detail of self, okay? That detail comes in the next level of densification. All right, so remember, we're getting denser here as we go. We came from coming in from source, contracting ourselves and expanding out into the light fields. Then we begin actually to contract or slow again. We come from density harmonic 5 to harmonic 4 to harmonic 3. Now we're in etheric matter. Then, next stop down, the next slowest set of flash line sequences is D4, 5, and 6, or if you're incoming, D6, 5, and 4. That forms harmonic universe 2. Harmonic universe 2 is semi-etheric matter. That's the stage of matter density that is someplace between what we would consider ghost-like matter density and what we see as physical matter density here. So that is, if you saw a being that beamed in that was of semi-etheric matter density, it would appear ghost-like, but more like Uncle John that came to visit. It would have much more feature distinction. It would be much more three-dimensional. You would feel more three-dimensional. We won't get into right here that the only way you'd see a being like that is if you have some of your higher strands activated, because you wouldn't be able to see them even if they came and stood in front of you if you only had 3 strands activated, if you didn't have some of the higher subharmonics, because their matter would be at a different flash line sequence than your matter. The trick of DNA activation is you're getting something called multi-vector flash lines moving in your body at once. When a body is born into a system, which I won't get into that right now either, but because it's a process, the fetal integration process, you end up with a body that has first 3 sets of flash line sequences for density 1, which is down here, dimensions 1, 2, and 3. Down here, you have a solid density 1 matter body, which is the physical matter density that we know and identify here. As we grow, we're supposed to begin activation of DNA strands that progressively allow us to, our bodies, to process the consciousness that goes with these higher stations of identity. Because in truth, we don't leave any of those stages. If we come in from source and begin the process of being put in manifestation, we leave a piece of our consciousness at each state. That means you have an ascended master that's you. That means you have an avatar that's you. The ascended master part of you would be out here in the primal sound fields. The part of you that we call a rishi, which is a bit higher than avatar, okay? If you're going to do the hierarchy, they're all equally blessed. But the rishi level of yourself would be stationed here in the primal light fields. The avatar level of yourself would be stationed here. Dark avatars go only up to here, 11.5, but Christos avatars, which is what humans were created to be, have that part of their avatar consciousness here, which is directly connected to the other levels of consciousness. Down here, in harmonic universe 3, you have your oversoul consciousness. In harmonic universe 2, dimensions 4, 5, 6, you have your soul consciousness. And here, you have your personality incarnate consciousness, the part of you that you know as you. But it's actually composed of 3 parts. It has your mental body. That's the egotistical part. That's not bad. Ego's not a bad word, by the way. You have negative ego, but general ego, what ego means, it's the part of you that looks out on dimension 3. It's the part of your consciousness simply looking out on dimension 3. It only becomes negative if it gets twisted up and starts to use ideas that are working against the divine blueprint. Okay? So you have, what you're composed of here is a dimension 3 mental body, a dimension 2 emotional body, which is the emotional elemental body. It's literally held in the elements that your body is made out of. Your water molecules, your protein molecules, all that stuff. Those molecules, what are they made out of? Who are they made out of? They're made out of you. The subatomic particles that you're made out of, your body is made out of, are one of the forms that your consciousness is taking right now to give you this experience. So when you look at your toe, for instance, you're seeing something composed of cells that are composed of molecules, that are composed of subatomic particles, that are composed of consciousness, the consciousness that is you. So there is a body consciousness that you have. You have your dimension 1 physical subatomic. That's where the tiniest little parts are. That's where particuli move into chelons, move into the structures that are before, which we'll get into later. They're called myons and dions and trions and things. They're stages of matter. Okay? You have in dimension 1 the things that become the physical body structure. In dimension 2, the complex elemental compositions in the body, which hold the part of your awareness that you experience as emotion. They are your elemental or telluric parts of consciousness. And then you have your D3 mental body that's focused in the 3-dimensional flash line sequence. See, these are parts of your consciousness that are focused within 3 different flash line sequences that are intimately intertwined within a 3-dimensional, remember they all intersect at each other at 90-degree angles, 90-degree shift in angular rotation and particle spin. That means part of your consciousness has particles in D1 at that flash line sequence, at that particular particle spin. Then you have another part of your consciousness manifesting as your emotional elemental body that has a different particle spin in both of those, and it's a little bit faster than this and a little bit slower than this. And here's where the self that says, I look in the mirror and I see I. That's the part of you, your rational mind, your rational ego mind, that's stationed in these flash line sequences. All these other flash line sequences that are part of universal structure are also part of your body template structure, your 15-dimensional anatomy. So you have a piece of yourself, literally, in each of the dimensional fields. Once you start to realize this, you can know you can never be alone again. You know, there's no such thing as God abandoning you. It can't. You know, sometimes it might want to. You know, the part of yourself that's up here may get pretty sick of watching the part of yourself that's down here that you can't get through to, or, you know, running around in circles doing wacky stuff, because it gets very frustrating for the part that's stationed down here when its memory banks are wiped out where it doesn't remember. The rest of it's up here. It feels like somebody's always manipulating it. Either the outside hologram is running it over, or some big something or other from the sky is pulling strings, because you're obviously not getting the life you're trying to make happen. Somebody's making it happen. And the parts of your consciousness up here, you can have distortions and twists in your consciousness, literally from D11 on down. Not everybody will, but you can. There are races of beings that literally have DNA template, what are called reversals, which are taking the divine blueprint and literally running it mathematically in reverse, which creates total distortion. It creates the opposite of Christos consciousness, which would be anti-Christos consciousness. Where there would be love, it creates evil and hate, you know, that kind of thing. That's where you get your opposite as far as Christos versus anti-Christos. But each one of these dimensions corresponds to part of your DNA strand template, which means these higher parts of you that are up there, out there, through there somewhere, are intimately connected literally to your body right here with you. They're just dormant to you right here, right now, but they're not dormant to themselves. When we begin to get into this a little, we find out we have lots of selves. We find out, forget the concept of just reincarnation like it's taught in Hinduism and things. Oh, well, I was one person, then I died, and then I moved in and became this other person. Doesn't work like that. Time, space is a scalar field. It all happens at once. Think about that for a minute in relation to the concept of reincarnation. Wait a minute. If it all happens at once, how could I have been before, died there, and then came back here now? It doesn't work that way. It means that you are simultaneously, you have a part of yourself that's manifesting itself, a 3-dimensional body, in each of the density levels, but it also works horizontally. In the universal structure, one harmonic universe has numerous time cycles and time continua within it. And we put pieces of ourself as an avatar. We put pieces of ourselves in various different parts of the planetary, galactic, and universal time cycles for each of the universes. As we get into, we don't cover it too much in this book, but as we got into the Templar teachings, we got into the fact that each of us have 212 cycles of incarnation operating at all times, and we have a minimum of 1,728 selves running around in 12 dimensions, all at the same time. And they are all connected through the DNA template of every one of them. So the memories that you will get from other lifetimes are lifetimes that are happening right now in their space-time location. It also means that you're more you than you think than reincarnation gives you. You know, okay, I was somebody, I used to be important, but I'm this person now and I'm nobody. You know, it isn't like that. You're all important. You might have been King Tut in one of your other time vectors. You still are King Tut in that time vector, but you're also you in this one. And that's just as important. So when we begin to realize we have all these aspects of self, the concept of ever being alone, you throw it right out the window. Ever being bored, just go talk to one of yourselves. You know, you don't need to talk to angels, for goodness sake. You have enough of you running around in the time matrix to keep yourself company for eons. What's fascinating is in activating DNA, you begin to get the memory back of the parts of yourself that are stationed in the other time vectors. You begin to get the memory and the knowledge, the awareness. You begin to remember places and times where humans didn't have the mutation, where they knew what it meant to be a walking, living, breathing avatar and ascended master. You also will begin to remember the things that happened on this planet, that though in those other time vectors that are happening now in those other time vectors, where great sorrows were there. So the emotional body and the D2 part of yourself may find the memories first. When you start to activate DNA, you may have cycles of great joy, where just, wow, comes and you feel the energy, you just feel expanded. And then the next week, you just may be so depressed you don't know what hit you. If you look at yourself over a 6-month period, you might swear you're manic depressive, because first you're up when you're processing higher frequency, and then you're down when you're processing twisted stuff that's coming through the template from the other time vectors. You learn to be loving towards yourself with this and realize that when the yucky stuff is coming through, it's making way for more of the higher stuff. But it's got to get out. It's got to get cleared. Part of what we'll talk about as we move through the Kathara program is learning about something called miasms. Miasms are basically antiparticle buildup in the particle field that hold what's called your karmic imprint into your DNA. This is the stuff that needs to be cleared. It comes through from the planetary grids, not just from your own personal DNA. So we're going to be investigating the process, whole bunches of processes that have to do with this. Oh, it's 10 o'clock? Okay. Yeah. See, I could keep you here till 2, which I won't do that. Okay. Well, actually, we're not doing too bad. We got this far anyway.
Go on for a bit if you want. Just tell me anytime.
Okay. Yeah, we're supposed to end at 10. All right. Is anybody has to go, like right now, are you tired? Do you want me to end for 10 o'clock, or do you want 15 minutes more?
As long as you're able.
Okay. I don't want to exhaust you, because it's supposed to be from 6 till 10. Is what? Is the limit? Okay. Okay. You want to go for 15 minutes more? Yeah. Okay. Good.
Good. Again, it's just finishing the Barbadias. That's like the next time for the planetary.
This is the next one?
Yeah.
Okay. I won't even start that now. It's another hour and 45 minutes. Yeah. Actually, it's pretty close. When I'm looking at it, the next thing, I knew there was going to be a break point either around page 25 or page 47, depending on how fast we moved. And I think it's good that we didn't go through to page 47. That's starting the Kathara grids. And this is where we get into more structure. Right now, you've got the diagram that's showing you, and all of these diagrams are in your books. Whatever you see go up here, you have a copy of in the manuals that you're getting. All right. Now, this structure is a core structure that will be used to show all sorts of things. As we move through the Kathara course, you'll find we'll discuss the currents of consciousness and energy that come down through this, that come into the time matrix from source through the structure. This is how we begin to learn what, if we're going to be a healing facilitator, How you know what frequency you're transmitting and when. How you get that particular frequency opened in your body. All of the healing systems on this planet for the last 200,000 years have only been able to run what's called one harmonic of energy, the density 1 harmonic. D1, 2, 3 frequency, and the subharmonics. Now when I talk about subharmonics, each dimension, each flash line, it's as if each light bulb is made of 12 little light bulbs. There are 12 subharmonics in each dimensional field. The 12 subharmonics correspond to the same flash lines of the 12 dimensions going up, but they're little versions of them. So you have subharmonics and harmonics. Now, in the last 200,000 years, because D12 current was not available on this planet, only these frequencies were able to be used in healing. Only these frequencies of consciousness were able to fully embody in the body without having major template restoration, which required help and contact with species that were off this planet that would help certain groups of humans to get their DNA back together. Now, what we are gifted with since January of 2000 is the return of the Maharata ray, the D12 current. From here, it's always there, but before the planetary grids were blocked at this level, you could not pull this frequency through that barrier. What we have now is the ability to pull this and all those two down through. The reason it's so important to be able to pull D12 frequency is there's something in between each set of 3 dimensions that's called a magnetic repulsion zone, where actually the 3-dimensional fields create spheres of energy that push away from each other because of the relationship between electrical and magnetic charge, just like ends of a magnet. If you put the 2 same charged, electrically charged ends together, they push away from each other. To get through this barrier, there are things called seals and crystal seals that need to be released. And D12 current is needed for them to be able to open and close naturally. So we've literally been sealed into in quarantine on this planet for 200,000 years. It wasn't too bad until 25,500 BC. There was enough problems, some DNA distortion, but we at least could live up to about 800 to 1,000 years old then. Between 25,500 BC and 3,470 BC, there were major grid distortions added to the ones that were already there, not only blocking the D12 frequency, but chopping all these up where we couldn't even run the subharmonics. We could only run part of the subharmonic of 4, which means strand 1 could run up to the 4th subharmonic, but 5 through 12 were turned off. What this has done has chopped our chromosomes up in many little pieces. And what we're doing with the process of Kathara healing and Merkaba healing, and the healing, there will be more. This is a technology that's evolving. We're getting more. This is the beginning. We have to start with Kathara, because Kathara allows us to run this frequency. This frequency is the carrier wave for all of the others. So any level here, any strand level that corresponds to these that you want to heal, you need to run the D12 current to get it down here into density 1, into this reality field. So we're beginning the process of running the Maharata frequency. We will get into something called triadic phase currents, which are the currents that correspond to the interdimensional field. There are names of them. The one we're going to learn to run in Kathara level 1 is the Duratic current, which corresponds to these. We're going to run Duratic phase 1, which is beginning the process by opening the D4 current on a D12 carrier wave. So we're going to learn the currents we're running, and by the end of this, and I was really excited that they're giving it to me, that's why I'm probably going to be up several nights in a row trying to get this ready, like from now until Sunday night. The Vecca codes that I mentioned earlier are the mathematical programs that correspond to very specific areas of your subtle body anatomy that you'll learn about, that correspond to not only these areas, but also these areas, which is literally being able to bring in the light, and primal sound imprint into the DNA template, which amplifies the heck out of any healing work you're going to do here. We're on a wonderful journey with the information that's being brought back here, and I'm very excited to bring it to you. I look at this as, I've worked really hard to translate a lot of this material. There were times when I worked 17-hour days, I'd sleep for 2 hours and get back up and do it again for week upon week upon week. The reason I did it was because of gratitude. I was so grateful to have access personally to this information, that to get it down on paper where other people could find that freedom just meant the world to me. And the beings, let's say, that have helped me to have access to the records that this could be translated back here. They've worked hard too. So the reason I work so hard, and now the reason that Az is working so hard with me, is because we know what this can do for you, and we are so grateful ourselves to the founders races for originally giving us this information. And I don't know, I get choked up with that one. I don't even know what to say. I hope that you can feel the frequency, the energy. Let your emotional bodies feel it a little. There's a freedom being brought back to our planet. Az and I are speakers of that freedom. We are witnesses to that freedom. But so can each of you be. We don't have anything more than what you have. We just got our wake-up call a little earlier, that's all. It was more like somebody turned the bed upside down and just dumped us on the floor. Wake up! It's kind of where we are right now. But when we get into, the reason I didn't go into more tomorrow is because we're going to start with the Kathara grids, and there's several levels of that, several diagrams to go through and to explain parts of it, and we'd be here probably till midnight if I started to introduce that now. So I won't, because somebody said 15 minutes is it. But we will get into all sorts of interesting things tomorrow. Let me see, do we have the thing there that lists the, no, we don't have that on there, do we? I don't think it's on the Mylar. Just want to give you a little what is that? Oh, no, that's not what I'm, I just want it, what I'm needing, but I can't read it because I'm looking for a format visually that my brain can read. Crystal seals grid, what's that? The diotic grid, what's that? Where do chakras and meridian lines and all those other miscellaneous pieces of things fit? We're going to find all this out tomorrow. When we get out of the context of healing, we'll go into the elements of healing. This is where we get into the human body translation, the microcosmic reflection of that macrocosmic structure within the human body form. And we'll talk about the human body Kathara grid and literally all of those parts that I've mentioned. We'll go from axiotonal lines into DNA templates, into chakras, meridian lines, which are different than axiotonal lines. We'll find out where these parts are. And that's the beginning of knowing how to run technology. Because if you don't know where your chakras are, you're not going to be able to pull up a certain current and run it someplace. You need to know where your chakras are. You need to know what seals need to be opened and what colors to use to open what seals. Okay, we'll get into this too, where you'll learn that each one of those flash line sequences creates a wavelength. And wavelength, as our scientists here will tell us, create color in terms of light. So we can direct wavelength by using chosen color, and we can direct frequency and wavelength simply by what colors we choose. But if we don't know what colors to choose that go with what flashline sequences that go with what dimensions, we're not going to know what we're doing. So we're going to learn all of those pieces and how they fit together. And that's the beginning of becoming a real Kathara healing facilitator. And I think I'll probably let you go on that note. And thank you very much. I'm just going to recap really fast what we talked about last night so we can move through into the structures that go along with the core structure. We talked about the context of healing last night, the context being the framework of the universe. We exist as a body within the universe. And if we're going to understand what it really means to do core template healing on ourselves, we need to understand our context, what we exist within. If we're running energy currents, what are they? Where are they coming from? So this is why in Kathara the beginning thing we do is we learn about universal order. We learn about primal order, the 15-dimensional system. We learn about basic things like scalar waves. Remember the little light bulbs we talked about that turn off and on. We learn about Partakai phasing. Now this I didn't read to you yesterday, but we talked about Partakai phasing. We talked about the standing scalar waves of Partakai, Partakay, and Partakam that literally form the scalar grid of which the particles that become matter are composed. These are the form that our consciousness takes on in order to enter the manifestation grid where an experience of 3D reality can happen. When we talked about Partakai phasing, we talked about the Partakai unit that breaks itself down into a Partakam and a Partakay, where it flashes on into manifestation, and then it reassembles itself back into the Partakai. So on and off is the flash line, or the phasing rhythm of Partakai units. It's the phasing rhythm of the individual Partakai units that creates the flashing on and off rhythms of the different lines of light bulbs, of scalar standing waves, that the dimensional structure itself is built upon. Just because I wanted to add these words, so you associate Partakai phasing and flashing on and off with two words, fission and fusion, because this is what it is about. It's very scientific stuff. When a Partakai breaks apart into a Partakai and a Particum, it is polarizing. It is a process of polarization, taking one thing and breaking the electrical charge into two, where they oppose each other, and then bringing them back together, which is depolarizing. Now, Partakai phasing, it's a process of internal fission. That would be the turning off phase of the light bulb, where the two elements come back into the one, where your Partakai and your Particum reassemble back into a Partakai. That is the process of fission, fusion. The things coming together. I got that backward. I'm sorry. Fusion. This is the contraction. This is where it turns off. Fusion is the contraction of the energy back into a vibration, as opposed to fission, which would cause it to expand and come back into manifestation as Partakai and Particum. So if we can just understand that the flashing on and off process of Partakai units is done through a continuing process of internal, meaning it's taking place within the particles of consciousness themselves, internal fission and fusion. When a thing goes into fusion, it is depolarizing and going back into its wholeness. And when it goes into fission, it is expanding out and going into manifestation, flashing on. So the processes of fission and fusion are an intrinsic part of manifestation, which means they're an intrinsic part of healing. Later, when we'll touch on some of these teachings a little bit, but they're not really part of Kathara. When we get into the science of ascension, there are some of the teachings coming out now that we'll be teaching this year in a program called the Dance of Life program that's just coming out, and it'll be ready probably March as our first workshop. We're going to get into these processes that we're learning here and how they apply to the concept of what's called ascension, or transdimensional ascension, being able to take your physical body elsewhere and out of here, including back into full at one with Source. Ascension is the process that we've been promised in all the holy books for so long, but they took out the how-to. So the processes of fission and fusion, internal fission and fusion, are a part of the core structure of reality and how it's built. It has to do with the Partakai phasing, the turning on and off of scalar wave patterns that literally flash matter on and off, flash you in and out of the hologram. These are intrinsic parts of the science of ascension as well. Because in the science of ascension, you learn the mechanics of what it takes to create particle fission and fusion internally inside of your body that allows your molecules to literally demanifest and then relocate to another space-time rhythm or another flashline rhythm where you can remanifest there. It's also the science of Stargate Passage. Ascension is Stargate Passage. So there's a lot more to the teachings than are just in Kathara. Kathara is the beginning, because if you don't understand Kathara, you're not going to know how to run energy. Kathara teaches you how to run energy, and it teaches you the anatomy you need to run it through. If you don't know where chakras are, and you don't know what they are, you're not going to be able to direct frequency into them to make them do things you want them to do. So I just wanted you to understand just a little bit more in this recap of what we talked about, the Partakai phasing, or the flashing on and off of the standing scalar waves of the little light bulbs. Has to do with internal fission, which is the expansion turn-on phase, and internal fusion, which is the contraction and pulling back together phase. Now, when you hear those words, usually they're in relation to science. Science is trying to figure out processes of cold fusion and all sorts of wild stuff. They're beginning the process of understanding what the atoms and molecules and nucleus of cells can do when you combine them in certain ways, but they don't understand the interdimensional template. Right now, quantum theory, and they use it as theory. A lot of scientists don't even believe that that's real yet. They have no concept that there are really multidimensional reality structures and that there's a very specific mathematical order to them. So right now, the way fission and fusion are being used in the scientific world is like a child playing with an atomic bomb. Right? They're going to create things that they don't even know they're creating, and they're going to be creating things not only here, but in other reality systems that they don't believe exist. They're going to be blowing things up in other places while they're trying to make energy here. So when we learn the processes of dimensional structure, we are actually getting an education that is far advanced compared to what you can pay $200,000 to go and get a degree in when you go into science here. You can do that, and what I'd love to see is people who've already done that get into this and start making the bridge between them, where they start to be able to see, oh, this is what that means. When we see this effect, this is where that's coming from. Instead of saying, they didn't teach me that in school, so it's wrong. Because that's where a lot of scientists will come from when they hear this material. Except we're getting to the point now where we're translating it into their language. At the end of this, we'll get into the two particle units or subparticle units called myons and dions, which are the first stage between going from the things we're talking about now, which are template. All right, these are waveforms that we're talking about, where waveforms of consciousness make the transition into matter density. The first thing they come out as are particles called myons and dions. And from there, they go into things like quarks and negative and positive charge, subatomic particles that build up to be molecules, that build up to be atoms atoms and elements and all of those things that matter is built on. So what we're talking about here directly applies to what science thinks it knows. And it's interesting because we're going into those bridges now. When we first started teaching this, it was like here was this science and there was that science, and they didn't speak the same language. But now we're making the bridge between them. So it won't be too long now before some of the more radical scientists in the world decide, this is worth paying attention to. And it's kind of interesting because you guys will be able to talk with them. And there's the scientific community can so often be like this elite club where because they know about this stuff and you don't, there's this intellectual ego attachment that happens where they think they know everything, and if they don't, they have to fill in the blanks and make it look like they do. And they don't like to hear about people who are presenting ideas that differ from what they know to be true, because what they know to be true in their own mind is the only thing that possibly can be. So there's going to be some interesting changes. You'll probably end up, because you're getting a body of data that has a science base as well as a spiritual base, you may find in your hologram, because you carry an energy signature now, you may find people of that association being drawn into your life in strange contexts. Run into them at work. You may find strange conversations coming up where you get to project out into the hologram the information you picked up here. So anyway, we'll get back on to, we got Partakai phasing, we got dimensions. It's important to understand that dimensions are scalar grids. They're those rows of those light bulbs. They have a specific structure. They are, what a dimension is a very specific flash line sequence, which is a sequence of those light bulbs or scalar waves turning on and off at very specific rhythms. What differs one dimension from the next is the flash line rhythm is different between each of them. The lower dimensions have slower on and off flash rhythms, and the higher ones have fastest. And there's a different angular rotation of particle spin, which means the spin axis that matter particles rotate on, has a 90-degree shift between each dimensional level. So these are very specific structures. This is the architecture of the universe, the primal order that dimensions are created on. There are infinite numbers of dimensions in the cosmic matrix, but they all follow one set pattern, and that's the 15-dimensional matrix system. That's the system of mathematical calculation that forms geometrical forms that allow the hologram of matter, the three-dimensional world, to be projected out. There are other types of things in creation that are not in manifest worlds, that are built on other things where you don't get three-dimensional perception. They're levels that a part of you already knows about, that's in those type of reality fields. And once you get out of the manifest hologram completely, the universe, in terms of consciousness, is limitless. So these aren't the only types of worlds there are, but as far as three-dimensional worlds, they all follow this structure. I have seen different programs of people teaching using dimensional octaves and healing and this kind of stuff, and they'll say, oh, we'll go up to dimension 5,940. And it's like, okay, where might that be located? What they tend to do is they will count the subharmonics, or pieces of subharmonics of one dimension, as a whole dimension, as if it was a whole dimension unto itself, where they'll say, oh, I'm on D12, when they're actually using the frequency that goes with D1, the 12th subharmonic. There's a big difference. When we're working with the currents that we're going to learn to work with today, they're called triadic phase currents. We are working with the currents of energy that are from the higher dimensional spectra. That means they have a faster flashline sequence than the frequencies that are available in dimensions 1, 2, and 3. Right now, we exist in dimensions 1, 2, and 3, the we that we know ourselves as. We also have parts of ourselves simultaneously in the other reality fields. And if you met one of yourselves from the other places, you'd think you'd met an alien because they look different. Our bodies in the higher dimensional fields don't look just like us. They're made of a different kind of matter, and the features are different. They're taller, for example. When we get our 12-strand pattern back, when we get our 12 strands cleared eventually, this race, we'll be anywhere from 7 to 12 feet tall. We'll have 144 chromosomes. We will be very different. If one of us came from the future after we had healed what's wrong with our race now and came to visit here in this present, they would be locked up by world military and studied from now until eternity because they would be considered a deviation or a mutation that has something to do with humans. But my goodness, what are they? And they'd be terrified of them. Because beings with 12-strand activation can do things like levitate, appear and disappear at will, project energy balls across the room. So it would be a real threat to national security if we all became 12-strand activated all of a sudden. Anyway, this is the beginning of evolving into what our full pattern of being a species is. There are reality fields that exist right now that have not had the problems of evolution that we have. We have been in quarantine on this planet for 25,500 years. We had problems before that, but they got really bad at that point. This is why we have no history records left. They've been purposely removed and hidden, and that wasn't a fair thing, and that's not something God wanted to do. All right, there's a lot of history that goes with what we teach. Most of that is released in the Templar course next weekend, where we get heavily into exploring the forbidden and the lost history, so we can understand how things could possibly have gotten as bad as they are right now. Because they're not good, but they're not hopeless by any means. The beginning of our getting control of our reality back, of our reality field, so we can begin to reinstate the Christos ideal, which is the heaven ideal, where people are living in harmony and they love each other and they're working cooperatively instead of competing with each other, and where there is no lack because you can manifest whatever it is you need. These are ideals that as a culture we can grow into. Our beginnings are learning to work with this. One of the things I try to avoid with a new audience dealing with at first, until they start to understand some of the other things that go with the Kathara healing, is where did this information come from? Outer space? Not exactly. Inner space? Closer. Now, we talked about the scalar grid of the universe, the universal matrix, and the fact that there's all these different dimensional fields. Dimensions go in sets of 3. And 3 dimensions create a 3-dimensional holographic electromagnetic domain. And in that domain, there are universes. And those universes are populated. We talked about the fact that we have other simultaneous incarnations because time is really a set of repeating flashline sequences. And they're all taking place at once. And you will see the linear progression of time that your body and your consciousness is coded to. The molecules in your body actually flash off and on. They flash off and on, and so does your consciousness within the rhythms of the specific 3-dimensional system that you were born into. Now, our science tells us that, well, now they're telling us that, gee, we found some planets that have the elements for life on them. Maybe we're not alone. But for years, we were just alone. We were the only species in the universe that had any intelligence. God created us to be the bosses, la-di-da, all that stuff. That's not true. There are people, huge civilizations in the 15-dimensional matrix, just our 15-dimensional time matrix, that have for eons, millions and millions and billions and billions, some of them years, evolved along the Christos principles. They are fluent time travelers. Time travel to them is nothing. Once you know how to regulate your DNA, you simply change your flashline sequence and you can pop up anywhere you want to project your thoughts to. You can take your body with you. They know how to do this. They've been watching and monitoring this place for a very long time. The group of beings we work with are called the Iani. The word Iani means of the Yanis, and Yanis is a word in the language called Anahazi that means ascended masters. So the beings that are called the Iani, that are part of the Guardian Alliance, for anybody who's read the Voyagers books, they are incarnate civilizations of ascended master consciousness from the primal sound fields. They have a direct open link to their consciousness in those levels. And they're in this time matrix as a guardian race to make sure that evolving civilizations don't compromise themselves with their free will so badly that they destroy the creation framework itself. because there are certain laws of energy that God set down when God created this framework that the hologram could take place within. If those laws of energy are bent and broken and abused to a certain degree, you can literally collapse a time matrix, which means you're still within God, but you're trapped within like a little energy bubble, and you have no memory. You have no memory of your relationship with self or God. The concepts of heaven and hell were simplified concepts to help us to understand that when we evolved along a certain set of principles, the Christos principles, that go with the universal structure. If we're working with universal structure, as God said it, we will progressively grow into a heavenly type of civilization. If we work in ways that we're using energy against the natural laws of creation, we will damage ourselves, and we will also cause damage to the creation framework. There is a lot of allowance in the will of God. There's a lot of horrible things allowed to take place. God didn't make them happen, but they're allowed to take place in order for consciousness to learn to not do it that way. But there is a limit of how far that can be allowed to go in a time matrix before it collapses the whole system. We're at a point in our civilization right now where if changes aren't made now during this Stargate opening cycle that we're moving into, we will not be able to bring it back around to the divine blueprint. So there is a lot of attention being paid to Earth right now by civilizations who have served as guardian races. There are civilizations of beings in three-dimensional hologram like we are, physically solid like we are. There are beings all the way up the matter density scale in their own type of civilizations that are working here. So this information is the original Christos Founders Race information, which means the first time this data on how creation works was translated and given to us by the primary races that seeded this time matrix. They exist in density 4, which means they're in pre-matter density, the liquid light beings. What's interesting is everybody that's in the lower densities has a self in one of those civilizations, their own Christos self. What's interesting to know is when we're being ourselves here and becoming aware that, wow, I have a Christos avatar level of self. That's me there. I have that consciousness so I can learn to access it. It's not just a matter of bringing that consciousness into your body. One of the amazing things is realizing that part of you also has its own body and its own density level. And it knows a whole bunch of people up there, and it's doing its own thing, as well as communicating with you. When you become an avatar, which means remember that you are one, and open the conduits, you start to realize that you are simultaneously expressing in 1,728 different forms all at the same time. Each form is a time vector. Each form is a life from birth to death or ascension. Some of them are immortal, where death isn't even a reality anymore because you know how to take your particles with you when you want to move from one dimensional space to another. There's a really interesting transition that happens when you begin to realize and begin to go into what's called even soul integration, where you start to become aware of yourself in dimension 4, 5, and 6, where you start to integrate the soul frequencies. You start to look at yourself as a collective. For a while, it took, when I was speaking, I had to be very careful because they kept referring to me as we. And then it was like, I got to realize you don't talk that way in this time frame, because people still say I, as in, when you say we, they think you're a split personality. It's like, and it's not about split personality, which is a fragmentation of the personality you have. Split personality is a thing that happens to some people when their DNA is really messed up, and they actually fragment into multiple personality fragments that fight for the body. This is the opposite of that. Split personality is a fragmentation process where the identity is falling apart rather than coming together. Multiple identity focus is what an avatar is, where you simultaneously get to the point where you can actually track all of yourselves, or at least the ones that are most pertinent to the focus that you're looking at. You'll find that you'll have memory. You have it right in your body right now of your fetal integration process, where your consciousness intersected with that baby body pattern in your mommy's womb. We all have that information stored in us. That means you also have what you were just before you made that decision. It also means you have the ability to go fast forward in time and find out what point you're leaving here. And you can have a direct influence on choosing how you want to leave. Do you want to die a body like most people do in this time frame? Sometimes it's worth doing that, even if you learn how to ascend. Sometimes there's so much in the body that your body's gone through that it would take too long and too much work to actually ascend that particular body, so you make a choice to die well instead. Once you become aware of the multidimensional consciousness that goes with integrating who you are, other people that haven't done that think you're absolutely out there. Because things that terrify them, things that they pray to some God they hope is there for, are just common knowledge to you. Like when you decide you're going to have children, or your children are having children, bringing grandchildren in the world. You can be fully aware of who they are and what they are before they're even conceived, and when they're planning to come, and where they'd like to be conceived, and all sorts of things. You can find out who they were. You look at your children differently. Just because they came through your body doesn't mean they're yours. Who is this soul? Hopefully it was a peaceful time we knew each other last time. If not, we'll act it out this time, I'm sure. It changes the whole way we perceive and interact with reality, progressively giving us more freedom, where we begin to realize there is huge freedom for free will choice and personal desire fulfillment in this reality. And we do not have to cause harm to others in order to fulfill ourselves. This system we're living in this world right now, is built upon the ideas of lack, of finite existence, of not enoughness of anything, and of a group of people that have to compete with each other in order to have the right and the energy to be on a planet. That is an anti-Christos model for the last 25,000 years, and for a bit of time before that. This planet has been fulfilling an anti-Christos vision that was not the vision of humankind, and it was not the vision of the founders' races. We're beginning to restore what the real vision was. The Christos realignment mission is about bringing that vision back, and it starts with our energy systems. It starts with each one of us recognizing that we are a blessed manifestation and face of God. You have every right to look in the mirror and say to yourself, I am God. That doesn't mean you're going to bully anybody else, because if you are, so are they. But next time you want to yell at somebody or whack them in the head, think about the fact that they may forgot too, but somebody's got to remember, we are God. If you smack somebody, you're smacking God. If they smack you, they're doing the same thing. After a while, when you start to play with your hologram and really dissect what you're doing in it, you start to ask yourself, why did I just come up and slap myself if somebody else came up and slapped you? Because you realize that's a face of you too. What am I trying to tell myself here? So you start to own your experience a little more, where the victim game doesn't entrap you so much. But that's later. The first part comes in learning the technologies that will allow you to begin to open in your body directly the consciousness that goes with the higher frequencies. It's kind of nice with Kathara healing, as you become a healing facilitator that's capable of assisting others in their healing process. Every time you assist someone else, you're opening those frequencies in yourself as well, which means you're helping to heal yourself. So every time you give, you're getting in return. So there's an orientation that comes with working with the Christos energies that has to do with whatever you desire most and feel you're most lacking, try to give it to someone. Because you're opening in a space in you for that energy to be refilled with the pattern. If you want to give it to yourself, give it to someone else first. And you will find that the universe responds in kind. That includes love. It includes money sometimes, because money can be a real bugger. The way it's done here in our civilization, we're like little monkeys on a string. Those little hidden forces that somehow control our world that we can never figure out who they are or how they're doing it, seem to have made it where money is what talks. Money has become the new god in this civilization. And money is an illusion. It's a symbol for the transferring of power. That's all it is. It's just paper or coin that means really nothing unless we assign a value to it. And you'll find if you want to make energy come to you in whatever form, you simply learn how to run energy in your body. If you want to help yourself and heal your bank account, you can do that in a reasonable way by learning to run energy. Simply run energy. Forget what it's called. Forget this money thing. I need money. What you're doing is manifesting a condition where you need money. We learn to talk to ourselves differently as we integrate the higher consciousness. We learn that we can say, I need money, or I'm aware that I created a situation where I don't have this right now. I think I'll change that. I have money now. Walk around for a week saying to yourself, I have money now. That feels good, doesn't it? No, you're manifesting a thought form. You have to put some energy into it, but the more you do, you're helping it into manifestation. You also learn to use your words very carefully. There's something very tricky about language. It's been used against us for 25,000 years. Language is sound. Yes, when it comes out of our mouths, it's sound. When we think, we talk to ourselves in our heads, we're still making sound, internal sound. Sound is vibration. Sound is a waveform. When we are using Kathara healing, we are using several things as the tools by which we will direct energy. One of them is color, because through directing color in the mind, you are directing very specific light, very specific wavelengths of light, which means if you know what colors go with what dimensions, you can, by choosing the right color, direct that frequency in your body. We are also using sound. Sound, every image in light has its equivalent translation in sound, which means every time we use words, there's a light pattern that goes with it. We repeatedly and continually program our hologram by the words we use to represent things to ourselves in the world. We can look at something and say, oh my God, isn't that awful? Oh, that's horrible. Oh, that's so terrible. It's devastating. If you want to create your emotional body going right down into the pits so you can explore what misery feels like, that's the way you want to speak to yourself. But if you want to get a handle on how you feel on a day-to-day basis, realize that there are technologies of light and sound, and words are part of those technologies. You will learn to say to yourself, wake up in the morning, realize I can have a good day, or I can have a day that really feels lousy. Who's going to make that happen? Me. Okay? I can choose to react to any situation, any way I desire. This is where your power comes in. You can have somebody drop a bomb in your front yard, and you can look at that and go into absolute terror. You can say, oh my God, we're hopeless, it's terrible, the world's falling apart. And you can go to try find somebody who's strong and is trying to calm people like that down. You can go into hysteria if you want to. You can go into the silent, God is punishing us. And if you tell yourself those things, you will live the reality as if that were so. That is what you will see evidence for in your hologram. We can lighten our load a lot if we make a promise to ourselves that I'm not going to be afraid to look at things that sound scary, but if somebody says, that's like something that really has a problem that has to be addressed, it's a bad thing, it's like really making a mess, you can say, yes, I acknowledge, I can see the mess that's making. So you face the things that are negative. You don't go off into la-la land like a lot of the people in the Light, Love, and Clueless movement do, where they say, oh, it's bad, I'm in Christ consciousness, I won't look at that. Great, stay in polarity then. You're still polarized if you're in, I don't look at negative stuff. You can look at negative stuff neutrally. You can say, there's a much better way to express that. You can see somebody in horrible pain and have great empathy for them. You can look at that two ways too. Oh, it's so terrible that this poor person is having to suffer. And if somebody close to us, it's very, very easy to go there. This poor person is suffering for no reason. It's so unfair. Life is unfair. God is unfair. How could they do this? Or somebody that dies before their time. How do you know what before their time was? How do you know that they even wanted to stay as long as they did? See, we're taught to look at things in our lives in ways that creates us misery. It creates us emotional body drama, so we never have time to go find out the good stuff that's in there with our minds. So one of the things, as we work with Kathara healing, we're going to use color to direct frequency because we're directing wavelengths of light. We are going to use sound tones at different times, particularly as we move into the Kathara 2 level. There are some sacred sounds, and I'll tell you in a minute why they're sacred compared to other sounds. And we're going to use something called symbol codes. Now, symbol codes are interesting. They look like drawings when we see them from here, from the three-dimensional mind. They are forms of light that hold mathematical pattern. Every image, if you draw a triangle, you are actually making a mathematical pattern. You are telling flashlight sequences what to do. When we use symbols in Kathara healing, we are activating, we are using symbols that are drawn from a knowledge of the universal symbol banks that know what the programs are and what they direct and what they control. The symbols that we use in Kathara healing, and there's going to be tomes of them eventually. Right now we work with one called the Hierophant and a few that you're going to learn at the end, the new stuff, called the Vecca codes. But some of them look like pretty pictures. These are frequency templates. They speak directly the mathematical instructions. When you hold a symbol in your mind, what you are doing is holding a mathematical signature. When you energize that signature with a color of light or a sound tone, you are adding energy to it, and when you direct it into a certain part of your anatomy, you are sending that mathematical program into that part of the anatomy to affect change, which implies it helps to know what your symbols are for, what symbols to use, because you don't want to send something in there that's going to mess things up. If you think about symbols in terms of walking down the street in a day, how many signs are we bombarded with? When we watch TV, how many things are we bombarded with visually? Visually, all of this is a mathematical scalar template. Everything in this room has a mathematical translation, which means it has a symbol that holds the image, a symbol that we would see from here, that holds the image of what that mathematical scalar grid is. This thing has a different mathematical code than my body, obviously, or I'd look like that and it would look like me. So everything you are built on sets of mathematical codes that can be translated, so your mind here can see them, into symbol images. There are some universal ones that apply to everything in manifestation, and they're the ones we're beginning to work with. That every template in the three-dimensional hologram is built upon some core symbols, which means those symbols can be used to directly reset the organic mathematical patterns back into the body. So the flash line sequences that the body is composed of, the template that the body is composed of, can be more rapidly restored and more directly restored. So Kathara Healing will use that. We will use symbols. We will use color to direct frequency, and we will use sound. The sounds are interesting. Now sounds, we're surrounded by it all the time. We're surrounded by awful sounds out there. We're surrounded by language of all sorts. We're also surrounded by all sorts of sounds that you can't really quite hear. The sounds of electricity, the sounds of some of the wild technologies they don't tell you about that are being operated out there. Things like HAARP and those kind of things. We're being bombarded with sound frequency, and it's directly affecting our bodies. When we use words from our particular language, the English language, or from any of the languages that are on the planet right now, we are using reversed fragments. There was an event that I talked about, I mentioned it briefly yesterday, the Tower of Babel incident that's recorded in the Bible. That's one of the few stories that were actually true that remained in the records because it became useful for those who wanted to use the misinterpretation to manipulate people. God didn't come down and blow up the Tower of Babel and scramble the languages. That was when the last grid distortions were put into the planetary grids. The ones that created the full checkerboard matrix mutation in the DNA, that literally chopped our DNA up in pieces and reversed part of it. The DNA and language are intimately connected. The DNA is made of light and sound templates. We are using a language now that carries partial reversals, which means the mathematical sequence, the way it was supposed to be in the body, where it was twisted from the grids and actually run in reverse sequence, which blocks the energy flow, is now in our languages. The languages that have evolved since the time of 25,500 BC began to have those reversals. After 3,470 BC, they went severely into reversals. When we work with the advanced aspects of Kathara Healing, we begin to use a language that sounds pretty foreign to hear. It was the original language, the first spoken auditory language in the time matrix. It's the founder's language. It's called Anahazi. It's a Lyran language. It's also called Mua. Mua are associated with the Lumerians because the Lumerians spoke that language. That's part of the history we get into in the Templar course. Now, when we see weird words, which we'll do in this Kilon, what's a Kilon? Right? Where did these words come from? Yeah, did I just like sit there one day and decide to invent a bunch of new words and give them meanings? No. The words that are used in Kathara, that are obviously not in the English dictionary or any other dictionary on the planet right now, are drawn from the Mua language, from the Anahazi language, the Lyran Syrian founder's language. It is the first and the purest auditory sound translation of the energy and mathematical signature behind energy essence. It is a huge language. There are pieces of Mua are actually involved with a bunch of different languages on the planet. There's a little piece here, a little piece there. So it wasn't all lost, only part of it was lost. Language is very important because language has the ability Sound has the ability to either activate DNA strands or shut them down, to either create blockages in your DNA template or to remove them. This is why there was great pains taken to manipulate languages on this planet, because if we had the sacred languages, we would be able to clear our bodies, and we would be able to get our consciousness and our avatar selves back in body. And once you're an avatar embodied, nobody's going to push you around. You know? There are certain forces that have been operating on this planet for 25,000 years that have a vested interest in keeping everybody controllable, because they don't have any power themselves, so they need to steal power from other people, collectives. That's what we're dealing with, and we're using languages right now that are actually helping to keep us trapped. We don't have much of a choice. I mean, if we can go learn Anahazi and start speaking Anahazi, everybody's just going to think, you know, put you in a wacky ward because, you know, that's not a known language. This person's crazy. You know, it would be hard to live in society if we were just going to go right back into the Anahazi language. But as we work with Kathara, we will learn certain key words, songs. There's something called the sacred songs, and it's P-S-O-N-N-S. It's not song, S-O-N-G, but it might as well be, because when you use them, they sound like them, and some of them are beautiful. There are ones that activate a part of your DNA template that's called the tribal shield, which is your connection to the species template, that activates more of your frequencies. So we're going to be using sound, and the more we work, the more we go into Kathara healing, the more we're going to touch on that. The Anahazi language is really beautiful. It has a... I'll do one thing for you. I'm just getting the urge to do this, and it's probably because they need to set the grid in the room, okay? Sound can set protection fields very easily. That's why, like, if you use certain sound tones, you could actually key a room where the astral plane can't interfere or mess with you if there's anything that would like to attach to people's fields and things. You can protect yourself from that. One of the songs that's used for that is the piece of a larger song, and I'll just do the little one, because this is a mathematical song. Again, these are all coded to the mathematics of scalar grids that create certain frequencies that come alive in the room. This one, you could probably sing it back to me, and I'm getting the urge that we should do this, okay? Now, I'll sing it once to you, and you've never heard, some of you might have heard it, but I think most of you haven't. It's a song that begins the process of activating the D12 frequency in and bringing it in quickly into the body. All right, you're not going to immediately be able to bring a lot of D12 frequency in, but when you use songs like this, it's a little short thing, it's enough to generate and to stimulate that frequency in the template and open it up. This one's called the Shaddai Ure song, and it's about anchoring the pillar of first cause light, as it's called, which is your connection to the primal light and sound fields through the divine blueprint. And it's very sweet and very short. It goes, Shaddai Ure Yakum Tan. You do it 3 times. Shaddai Ure Yakum Tan. Shaddai Ure Yakum Tan. Now if you play with just a few little syllables there, that's in the Anahazi language, and it's part of a larger song that takes a while to learn. This song is going to be put in the new material, by the way. So the one I'm talking about that this is a part of, it's the Christos Invocation song, where it blows open your connection to your Christos self to get a burst of D12 frequency to run through you. And it's very good if you need protection or if you need to solve a problem or anything like that, and a lot of other things. Just wanted to give you an example. Now, try to, just for a minute, go in your head and do the Shaddai Ure Yakum Tan with that tone. Shaddai Ure Yakum Tan. Just try to hear it in your head. Try to feel it. Try to feel where in your body you're feeling it. These are very specific areas of the body that these sounds go with. The first places you should feel it are almost completely across the front of your chest. Right here, across the heart chakra, and down through here, across the middle. That's your astral body connection with your 4th chakra, and your mental body connection with the 3rd chakra. When you build frequency by repeating, this is why a lot of the Eastern religions will have you go Om from now until eternity, right? You are building the frequency pattern with repetition of the sound. You are creating critical mass with the sound, critical mass of those frequencies. So just the simple process of singing the Shaddai Ure Yakum Tan to yourself, kind of like a little melody as you go about your days, you are helping your DNA to activate. You are helping your Christos consciousness to get back in your body faster. And eventually you will learn how to use songs like that to direct energy that could literally get you out of predicaments if you needed to. Let's say you were one of those people that were on the airplane that crashed into one of the trade towers. If anybody on that plane knew how to run sound frequency, they could have sang a song like a lullaby that would have neutralized the neurological structure of the guys with the guns. Wouldn't hurt them. It'd just make them go to sleep for a while. That is the power of sound. If you want examples of the power of sound, think about the pyramids in Egypt. You know the stuff we're taught about how they might have got those blocks up there? You're right. They hoisted them up with thousands of men. Sure they did. No, that was only in the reconstruction after they got knocked down several times and we didn't have the sound technologies anymore. When they were originally built, just like things in Machu Picchu, Peru, and just like there's temples all over the place, that how did they get those big things up there, those huge thousands of tons of rock up there when they hadn't even had some of them the wheel yet? Right? Sound. You would literally have groups of people sit and sing certain songs together and build a waveform, a standing waveform, and then together project it with thought, project it toward the object with the same intention. And you could literally float things up large spaces. You could actually make them disappear here and appear where you wanted them. These are the powers that used to belong to humanity. These are the powers we're moving back toward. Now, we have dimensions. We talked about it before. Dimensions, scalar grids of consciousness, composed of interwoven layers of scalar waves with varying flash line sequences, which means they have different flash line rhythms, or frequency bands. All right, we use the word frequency a lot, and you'll find that a lot in the New Age movement as well. As far as, oh, I'm doing this frequency, that frequency. What is the frequency? A frequency is simply a flash line sequence, or a set of flash line sequences. We'll get into in a minute the 12 subharmonics that go with each dimension. And if we recognize that each dimension is a set of very specific flash line sequences, and that there are smaller sequences of flashing that are going on within that larger sequence, that's where we understand subharmonics. All right, can we put the next one up, please? Let me see if I need the next one or not. Yeah, we'll do that one. Okay. Yeah, I'll do that. Okay, there's one thing that this is going to take us into that it's important that we begin to understand, because science as it is today does not make this distinction, and neither do New Age teachings. The difference between vibration and oscillation. Most people use those words interchangeably as if they mean the same thing. Like, oh, I'm going to raise my vibration, or they don't usually say, I'm going to do anything to my oscillation. Right? They use the word vibration. But it's tricky, 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 because oscillation is the turning on. All right? When you raise your oscillation, you are raising your frequency. You are bringing in higher frequency. Now, if you say, I'm going to raise my vibration, it means you're lowering your oscillation. It means you're slowing yourself down. It means you're lowering your frequency. There's a trick that's being run in the New Age movement where we're taught to raise our vibration so we can really slow ourselves down to the point where we can't get any of our higher consciousness into our body. Some of those teachings are being billed under Christ consciousness teachings. Good luck. So if we understand that there are some core differences when we understand core creation physics, when a thing is vibrating, it's in its contracted, dormant state, like a particum. It's like the silent song, the pre-sound aspect. And when it comes into activation and forms a standing scalar wave, or that light bulb turns on, that is its oscillation form. So we have vibration and oscillation, vibration and oscillation. And if you want to get higher frequency into your body, frequency is sets of dimensional flashline sequences. If you want higher frequency, you want higher flashline sequences, which means you want things that flash on and off faster. You want to raise your oscillation rate. You want to lower your vibration. So there's little tricks that if you don't know the real core meaning of words, and science right now doesn't make a huge differentiation between them. They don't understand that one is a form of energy holding and contraction, and the other is the same energy expanding into expression. So we use vibration and oscillation in Kathara healing in that way. We don't worry a lot about talking about, oh, let's raise your vibration or lower your oscillation. We deal more with very specifics in the body. But it's important to understand that we have frequency bands. They are synchronized, repeating flashline sequences of Partakai phasing. So you have a dimension. We call it a dimensional frequency band. It's not only a flashing on and off rhythm, it's a repeating cycle that continues on and on and on and always follows that pattern. Okay? So it's a synchronized. Word synchronized means dimension 1 has its set pattern and cycle that it keeps doing. There's a synchronization between these flashes in dimension 1 and the next one in dimension 2. They all speak to each other up and down the 15-dimensional scale, where they're literally all synchronized as ways to move consciousness. Moving consciousness, where consciousness hops from one scalar waveform to the next, is what allows us to perceive linear progression of time. So we have synchronized frequency bands, synchronized flash line sequences that literally allow consciousness that's actually standing still and just hanging out in the matrix to experience itself in little pieces as if it were moving through time. So we have frequency bands that are synchronized repeating flash line sequences of Partakai phasing that give the appearance of manifest movement of wave spectra within a dimensional scalar grid. Subfrequency bands are portions of the flash line sequences that make up whole dimensional frequency bands. So you have the whole frequency band in a dimension, and then you have little ones that are running in. It's like one big circle would be your flash line sequence, a circular flash line sequence of light bulbs turning on and off, and there's lots of little circles inside of that that are all synchronized. The on and off rhythms are synchronized. These flash line sequences and the synchronization of them that are set by the core dimensional templates are what give us our breathing rhythm, our heart rate, our metabolic rates. What they also do, and it's something most of us don't know we do yet, is they make us flash on and off into and out of manifestation. Between each moment, we are actually disappearing and reappearing. So it's not that hard to disappear. Now where we go right now is we go back into density 1, which is dimension 1, 2, and 3, because we haven't figured out how to get our consciousness out of those flash lines yet. But we are actually, in between the moments of our time, appearing and disappearing. Our whole hologram is doing it. And everything on the planet is synchronized by the flash line sequences of, first, the density level we're in, which is dimensions 1, 2, and 3. In this harmonic universe 1, the whole harmonic universe, that means all the planets, stars, everything they're going to find out in outer space, are synchronized on the same set of 3 flash line sequences on frequency bands. And everything that comes into this reality field adopts that as part of their template. If they didn't adopt it, they wouldn't be able to get in here and experience the hologram. What's kind of fun about realizing that you're much more than what you see when you look in the mirror is to start playing with it. I won't do it right now. If we have time later, I'll play with this, but we don't really need to because it's not that important, but it's fun. If you want to find out what it means to flash on and off in between moments, there's a way you can train your eyes to begin to see where matter actually disappears and comes back again. And it's usually the easiest way to do it is if you take a partner and you sit like knee to knee and you look into each other's eyes. And there'll be a discomfort level first as the whites of your eyes start to actually pick up. The whites of your eyes are more sensitive to interdimensional frequency. That's why you'll see things out of the corner of your eye and you try to look at them and they disappear a lot of times. Eventually, the rest of your eye will see as well. But what you have to do to begin to see the spots between moments, you just stare at somebody and have them stare at you, right in the eye. Now you're doing a current thing here. You're transmitting current through your eyes. We all do. And they're transmitting it back to you, and you're accelerating the frequency in the space between you. One of the first effects you'll get is you want to rub your eyes because they'll burn. They'll start to burn because the matter of your eyes that they're made of are not used to the frequency yet. This is higher frequency than what your eyes are used to, so they burn. So if you can try to move through that a little bit. I remember doing this with somebody, and literally we were so determined to see what was in the spaces between moments that we're standing there, we're like crying, our eyes are crying, I'm not going to close them, not going to close them yet. And we were able to teach our eyes after a while to where it might, in the first minute and a half, we might have ended up, with the eyes crying, where we could do it for 5 or 10 minutes before the eyes would start to burn, because we got our eyes used to being able to dealing with the higher frequencies that were being generated. One of the first effects you'll see is you're staring at the person, and over here, you'll usually catch it out of the periphery. If you're staring right at their eyes, a part of their head will disappear. Not the whole thing, just like a blank spot, a black spot appears. Did I see that? No, I mustn't have saw that, did I? And you look for it and try to look at it, and it's not there, because the whites of your eyes are seeing faster speed than the rest of your eyes. You learn to look at peripheral vision. You learn to actually hold a focus in somebody's eyes while at the same time teaching the whites of your eyes to look here at the same time and be aware of it, which is really weird. It feels like you have 4 eyes when you start to do that. And then you realize you can take this one and make it go over there, and like this, you'd be like a lizard. You know how lizards do their eyes around like that? You start to realize your perceptions can move a lot more than you're used to. So it's worth playing that game because you can see some interesting things if you work with a partner, or you can do it in a mirror, but I wouldn't suggest doing that yet because there are things you need to do to mirrors so you don't get in trouble with them. Mirrors bend light. They bend light in ways that make them easy energy doorways. And you don't know what they connect to. And sometimes somebody on the other side does. And it might not be something that you want to deal with. We have mirrors in our... There used to be cultures that did not allow mirrors in their homes because they'd have things flying through them all the time. From the astral plane, from other time frames. There were times on this planet where civilizations were just not... Anything reflective was considered dangerous because it was an open doorway to God knows what. And usually it wasn't something that God would want there. So there are ways we can code our mirrors that lock them just into our own D12 Christos pattern, so you'll be safe. When we get done with the Kathara workshop, where you learn how to run Maharata current, you could actually do a healing session on a mirror. The technique that we're going to probably by tomorrow is where we're going to do it, and it's going to be fun because tomorrow I'm going to ask you to bring like a little blanket or something to lay on because we're actually going to do facilitations, and people are going to have to like take turns being facilitator and client. Image as your partner in this experiment and stare into your eyes a bit. Find the burning phase. Okay, the frequency is going up. When your eyes start to burn, know the frequency is raising. That's why if we stare at the sun very quickly, our eyes will burn because the sun is transmitting higher frequency waveforms. But when you start to get into the interdimensional spectra, when it's bouncing back at you from a mirror from somebody else's eyes, it happens really intensely and quickly. Try to keep your eyes open through it, and if it gets really bad, don't like hurt your eyes. All right, break the focus. But then you have to start the climb into the frequency again. What you can see when you get good at holding this focus is you can begin to see the other selves of you or the other person that you're looking at. If you want to know who you are in other time vectors right now, and a lot of people say, oh, well, that's just the past, they're dead and gone, it's not important. Excuse me, time is simultaneous, they're not dead and gone. It is important, they're alive right now, wouldn't it be neat to talk to them? You can also use that to be able to access, if you can find a self in another time vector and make a mind link, which can often start with finding that space, that self, in between the spaces between moments, you can make a telepathic mind link. They'll have a different language than you, and very rarely will you translate language back and forth. But what you will get is the ability to do direct cognition. You can get to the point where you can move the consciousness from you, and you can ask them, into their field. They're a part of you. If they're part of your own avatar, you have a right to move your focus between them. You're not inflicting yourself on somebody else. You move your focus in, and you can see out through their eyes. Now, you can't influence their thoughts. That would be messing with their free will. But you can look out through their eyes, and they can look out through yours. So there's a lot of things that you can do when you begin to work with frequency. Okay? This last part in here, the vibration. The vibration is the internal movement or energy holding. The movement is on the inside rather than expressed on the outside. That's vibration. The energy holding of Partakai units. So you have Partakai units, and they're actually the Partakam units that hold the energy. They're in Partakam phase when they're holding energy and vibrating. Then they go into Partakai phase when they turn on. And there's a synchronization where you end up with Partakai, Partakay, and Partakam all manifest at the same time. They're all different phases of the same energy, but that gets into the flashline sequences, and the synchronization between the rhythms of them is just things you need to know basically, but you don't need to remember because you're not going to, you don't have to remember the definitions all the time, but knowing they're there in your book, that if you forgot what something is, you can go back and look at it. Okay, oscillation is the external movement. The energy goes onto the outside, or energy expended, or expanded, or transmitted by Partakai units. Vibratory oscillation rate, which is the rate of Partakai phasing, vibration oscillation, vibratory oscillation rate, is the rate at which Partakai phasing, flashing on and off, occurs. So it is simply the rate of Partakai phasing. That is what is meant by vibration and oscillation. When science uses vibration and oscillation as characteristics to describe what they're perceiving in waveforms and those kind of things, what they are seeing are the evidence of Partakai phasing, but they don't know Partakai exists yet. They're seeing the evidence, and very often the evidence that is actually a symptom of something else is identified as the something because they don't realize it's only a symptom of something deeper. So vibration and oscillation, it's good to understand this basic difference between them. Vibration and oscillation exist in direct proportion to each other. As vibration increases, energy holding increases, more goes inside, oscillation decreases because you're taking energy from out here and pulling it in. Faster flash line sequences, the ones that move faster, are higher frequency, expend more energy, which means they have a raised oscillation rate and a lowered vibration rate. They move faster, they expend more, they oscillate faster. They're expending more energy. Vibration is the lower fields can be considered vibrating fields comparatively. They have a higher vibration rate and a lower oscillation rate. As you move up the 15-dimensional scale, that changes. When you get to the primal light fields at dimension 13, 14, and 15, they are continually on. They have the highest oscillation rate and the lowest vibration. When you go into the primal sound fields beyond that, they have no light at all. They're completely in the vibration state. So they have the highest vibration and the lowest oscillation. And then when you take that down and break it into synchronized groups of three-dimensional systems, you have a vibrational oscillation rate, the rate at which each dimension will have its own vibration and oscillation rate. And they're all synchronized and interwoven with each other. And they're literally the passages or pulses of consciousness that allow us to move through the hologram. So we're built on vibration and oscillation. Higher oscillation, slower vibration creates slower electron movement around the nucleus and less perceivable density of matter. Here we go, flash lines and matter density levels. Gets interesting. Now this chart, it's on page 18 in your books, but you don't have to look at it. We'll just put it on. Please, Libby. This one gives you some basic characteristics of vibration and oscillation. Okay? These are the higher dimensional fields, which are considered dimension 8 through 15. They have a lower vibration, a higher oscillation. They're expanding energy. They're higher frequency. They have a shorter wavelength. They have slower electron spin. They're less dense, and they're more electric. Over here, the lower dimensional fields that we're in right now, 1 through 8, they have a higher vibration, a lower oscillation. They're contracting energy. They're lower frequency. They have longer wavelength. They have faster electron spin around the nucleus, more density, and they're more magnetic. These are some of the characteristics of matter within the 15-dimensional structure. Now, lower vibration equals less energy holding in the particuli. Now, this is the ones for the higher dimensional fields. This would be the low vibration, high oscillation. Low vibration equals less energy holding in particuli units, more energy expended from particuli units. Higher oscillation equals more expansion. That equals faster flash rate of particuli, higher frequency of flash, it happens more often. More external movement, faster oscillation, shorter wavelength, slower electron spin around the nucleus, which gets into complicated stuff that you need a degree in physics to understand. Greater expansion of energy, and it's less dense, less magnetic, more electric. These characteristics become very interesting when we're just getting into it, and it's not going to be even the new stuff because it's not even ready for that. They've been starting to show how this has to do with our perception of time and our ability to move through time. All of this affects temperature, where if we went out and we were freezing to death someplace, if we knew how to modulate the vibration oscillation rate of our body, we could literally not feel the cold and not have it affect us. We could expand and contract time if we knew the vibrational sciences to that degree. They're starting to bring some of it through, and some of it, I'll tell you, is complex. Because it's almost like you get dyslexic with it. Wait a minute, shouldn't it be the other way? No. Remember oscillation and vibration? Oh yeah, okay. So there's a lot to learn with this. This is the beginning. But literally our whole time-space experience is built on what vibration and oscillation are doing with each other within our bodies, within our consciousness, and within the world around us. We exist in relation to the hologram around us. This is a part of ourself that's out here in a different form than us, and we call it separate from us. And this is the self that's here in this body, and then there's another part of us that we know is there someplace. These are vibrational oscillation relationships, and you can change what your relationship out here is. You can change your experience of temperature. You can change your experience of space and time by learning to control your vibration and oscillation rate, which is learning to control your flash line sequences, which is learning to control the dimensional levels of your own consciousness. So these teachings are far-reaching. These are the beginnings of learning how to understand what the framework is and what our body parts are that are connected to that. But the Kathara healing, there are millions of books that need to be written on this, and it is a master's course in learning to get a handle on your hologram again, because we were created to have a handle on our hologram and not get run over by it. Okay, can we go to the next one, please? Okay, what's this? Okay, this is some of the stuff that I was talking about yesterday when I showed the 15-dimensional matrix, that diagram with the ovals in it. It says, what is it? What's on the top of that one? Dimension and full frequency.
Just that, she put the frequency now.
Okay, so we go from knowing that a dimension is a full frequency band or a full cycle of flash lines, a full flash line sequence. Then we get into the universal morphogenetic template. Now the word morphogenetic refers to the form-holding blueprint, and it's actually a very specific layer which can be considered like a thought form layer that's made out of chelons that we'll talk about later. Remember, chelons are groups of particuli that build up into three-dimensional forms. They're crystallized units of particuli, three-dimensionally crystallized units of particuli. The universal morphogenetic template, which is the universal thought field that's made of chelons, is built upon sets of 15 primary flash line sequences. That's where we get our 15 dimensions. There are 15 primary flash line sequences that create the different dimensional bands that our consciousness is stationed in. They form a 15-dimensional time matrix. Now, there are more than one 15-dimensional time matrix. They go in sets. A 15-dimensional time matrix implies its antiparticle double. Okay? You have a particum universe that's called base magnetic, which is base vibration, and it will have its absolute double that it's connected to. That is the base oscillation or base electric, particle, antiparticle. There's more to the words particle and antiparticle. We call them base electrical and base magnetic. Base electrical would be the one that had a bit higher frequency, meaning it was oscillating more. And the other one, the base magnetic, would be the one that receives that energy, and it's the same energy that goes between them. Now, the fact that one 15-dimensional time matrix implies its opposite, its counterpart, its antiparticle double. It implies you not only have other incarnations of you running around in the time matrix, you also have replicas. You have a doppelganger, which is an old word that was used to describe a double self, another self from a parallel universe. The antiparticle universe is the parallel universe. We have parallel universes and we have adjacent universes, which are not directly parallel. They're related, but not directly. All right. The structure of a 15-dimensional time matrix, you have one, and if you imagine the oval shape that we'll go back to in a minute, if you imagine that, and then another one, that's one system. There are sets of these. They go in sets of 12. So you have 24 time matrices, and that forms a cluster. And the cosmic structure is built on clusters of these. The universe is huge. To give you an idea of how huge is, when we talk about these structures, okay, we're in one time matrix. All right, we are in the first density level right now, what we're focused in one time matrix, dimensions 1, 2, and 3. Ourselves, our planet, is there. So is the sun and all the planets in our galaxy. So is anything that science has fed us pictures from the Hubble spacecraft with. Right now, as long as science could send out a projectile, and if it had endless fuel and could go out forever and ever and ever and ever, it would seem, eventually they would find a curve in time, where mathematics and magnetics start to do weird things. Because we're in a sphere. It's a harmonic universe, and when we get later, tomorrow, we'll be talking about Merkaba, and how at the center of a Merkaba field, there's something called a form constant that forms, which is a sphere of energy that creates an electromagnetic domain. That is the screen on which our consciousness, within which our consciousness projects reality. But if you think about how huge our universe seems to be, just from the little bit of pictures the Hubble is sending back to us, we have fathom, wow, look at it, there are billions and billions of things out there. That's one harmonic universe. Just one. There are 5 in this time matrix. This is only one time matrix. It implies it has a double, but they go in sets of 24, but there's not just one set of 24. It's massive. The hologram field is massive, And what's fascinating about it is it's all taking place in the exact same space at the exact same time. Space is an illusion of the hologram. Actually having any type of space. Space implies from one place and then another place. It's all happening in one place, which is the consciousness focus of Source. What makes reality fields, billions and billions of reality fields that are all stacked, they're like thought forms, all stacked together. What makes us able to see one set of them and not another are they're all running on different flashline sequences. We will see only the one that our consciousness has taken on the form of, which means if we're in this system here, we've taken on a form of three-dimensional reality in density 1. So our consciousness is composed down here of waveforms that flash on and off at the D1, 2, 3 rhythm. It has a very specific angular rotation of particle spin that our particles will manifest on because of that. And we will literally be able to walk through the rest of the hologram as if it isn't there. Because in our flash line, it isn't. But all the flash lines are actually just pulses of consciousness that take place in the same space. We are all within God. We never move away from God. It all exists. We are thought forms in the hologram of the mind of God. And we are the mind of God as well. Everything in the universe is a face of God. So there's a hugeness and a smallness that go right hand in hand together with understanding this. We can go for billions of years and billions of miles while we're in hologram. In fact, our hologram will expand to keep up with our thoughts. We will find new angles to explore that weren't there before because we think they might be able to be there. Because we are created in the image of God. Humans were created in the image of God, which means they are consciousness that just by thought has the empowerment to create. How did God create this reality field? Thought it. Decided, let's try that. Thought it, felt it. Made it happen. Humans do the same thing, but we forgot that we do it. Okay, let's say,
Sorry, Karen.
What were you going to say?
You're talking to me.
Okay, now, dimensions are organized into sets of three full flashline sequences, or 3 frequency bands, that create the template through which three-dimensional manifestation can be experienced. Each set of 3 dimensions is called a harmonic universe, as we talked about yesterday. There are 5 harmonic universes within a 15-dimensional time matrix. Each dimension contains 12 primary sub-frequency bands, which if you took a flashline sequence and just looked at this part of it, that would be that one. It's almost like doing squiggles around and round and round. Because a flash line is this, but within it, it has these little loops where it makes little cycles. If you look at this as a time cycle, these are little time continuums that run within them. Just like we have cycles that run nature. We have the cycles of the seasons. We have the cycles of the tides. We have cycles of day to night. We have cycles of years. We have cycles of millennia. Time is circular. It's a cycle. It always comes back to the same point, and then you have a chance to jump up to the next flash line. And if you don't make it, you go back and you repeat the same stuff all over again. Okay, yes?
I think back to the bigger picture you were talking about earlier, when you were talking about the hologram. Now, within that larger scheme, what is outside of that holographic, or is that even part of the sort of our comprehension? What is outside of that hologram?
Okay, what if you expand it all the way up past the 15-dimensional matrix, what is outside of there? Is that what you're asking? Okay, I'll get to that in a second. Okay, we're going to put that back up, that diagram, and I'll use that to go there. I'll ask that. Okay. Okay, we got that. I'm just seeing if we have to cover these up.
We've pretty much done it.
What? Okay, yeah, let's go back to this one now. This is where we left off yesterday. Now, she'd asked a good question. She'd say, what's it like when you get out of here? Okay, if we're stationed down in here in our hologram, what's it like out here? Now, out here is Source. All right, that's Source consciousness that we talked about yesterday. This is a 15-dimensional time matrix. And when we expand out of the directly dimensionalized system into the primal light fields, then into the primal sound fields, and the last expansion is out into Source. What is that like? Was the question. What's it like when you get out there? Well, let's put it this way. You can remember some of it if you have experienced a full set of ascension, which means that you've come in to the hologram and literally made your way back out, and you have your DNA all the way up, encoded, where you have the memory files. That's the difference between becoming an ascended master and having an ascended master consciousness that you don't remember having. Is you create the sequence back in your DNA template. By activating the DNA, you remember what it was like up there. There are some things of what it's like when you get past here that you just can't put words on. They don't fit. You can't draw pictures because you are beyond sound. You are beyond light. You are therefore beyond form. You're beyond externalization of any kind. You're also beyond individuation while having a memory of any individuation you ever experimented with. So you will know every self you ever were. And you will know you were always much more than that. There are states of direct cognition. The greatest way I can explain it really is a continual state of cosmic direct cognition, of knowing. And there are awesome qualities of it, where there is no fear there. The things we call emotion, and the way emotion works here. You progressively, emotion turns into something else as you move up in your evolution, as you become a soul-integrated person, then an oversoul-integrated, then a Christos avatar, and then a Rishi, and then an ascended master. It's not that you don't have emotion, or you don't feel, or you don't understand it. But you get into this space where everything's okay, no matter what it is. And that doesn't mean you approve of things that are made to create harm. But you're able to see the lessons that consciousness is teaching itself. And you also respect the other aspects of consciousness enough to not inflict your will on them and say, you can't learn that way because I know a better way. There's a great understanding and compassion that comes. And this is why there's a saying, God allows. God does allow. God doesn't make bad stuff happen. God allows us to experiment with what it means to be manifest, because God is learning through each of us as well. Even though God, that consciousness, knows it all already. Because time, learning, implies that there's a point where one didn't know something, there's a point where one is. If time isn't real, which once you get out of here, time isn't real, it implies that it's all known already anyway. It also implies, or it might, the logical mind might think it implies that everything is predestined, which means we don't have free will, which means we got stuck here by somebody, even if it's our higher self, and we just have a life path that we have to live, and whatever we do doesn't make any difference because it's going to happen to us anyway. That's not the way it is. We do have free will. We have been given, like Source, created in the image of God, the ability to directly affect with our thoughts and desires what the hologram we see personally is going to be. It becomes a part of the divine blueprint. When we think a thought, it has the ability to expand the divine blueprint. If it is a thought that is not in harmony with the divine blueprint, it has the ability to erode the divine blueprint. So we are entrusted and given a gift of free will while we're here, but we're entrusted with a responsibility that goes with it. When we get beyond here, it's all a game. In the mind of God, in the heart of God, it's a beloved game. Everybody is loved hugely because Source, when you are at one with Source, it recognizes every being that was ever manifest as a part of itself. It recognizes the struggles, the things that were learned in that framework, the things that were experienced. There's a huge love. God does not pass judgment on us. That was a lie that was put in to manipulate people here in order to make them subservient to outside external authorities, which are anti-Christos teachings that were meant to take you away from your inner Christos and your direct connection of Source and plug you in to an external source's authority so it could steal your energy. Right now, we're learning to get our connection back. And with it, there's going to be changes. We'll watch our emotions grow, sometimes turbulently, where you're clearing out your DNA template and all sorts of stuff starts to kick up and you just feel really grouchy and lousy and you want to bite. Or you feel really weepy and you just want to cry and you have no idea why. It has to do with what happened 2 million years ago in the incarnation you have there. You just don't remember that part. You're just getting the tears. You know? Or you may get manic, where you just feel the times that once upon a time, I knew I had the power. There's sometimes all of us have had experiences of mastery of some sort or another. There are times where you may have, where you go out in... this can happen in nature a lot because there were times when this race were masters of the elemental kingdoms. Talk about Merlins and things like that. We didn't need Merlin, wizards and stuff, because we had a direct relationship with the consciousness of dimension 1 and 2, which are called the Manu consciousness, the elementals. We could direct the weather by thought and will and heart. And as long as we didn't abuse that, it wouldn't abuse us. The weather was great. The consciousness, the controls, the weather patterns, and the natural earth patterns, you could direct tides. If you were nice, if you understood it was a co-creative experience, which means you're not going to inflict your will on that thing, call it an ocean. You're not going to inflict your will on it and treat it as if it's not conscious, so it's going to do your bidding. The way this race used to have the power to interface with the elements and to get them to do what they wanted was out of love, because they would recognize that the molecules that compose the other things were just as conscious as they were, and they were just as much a part of God as the self was. And there was a loving co-creative relationship where if you were out in a boat on an ocean and the sea started to kick up, first thing you'd think was, anything I can do to help you? Is something bothering you, spirit of the ocean, right now? Obviously you're throwing energy around. It's just something you need to do, and if it's just something you need to do and I can't help you, you do it over there or help me to get over here so it doesn't harm me. We would have these abilities, and we would have conversations sometimes like that, but most often they came right from here, and there were no words even involved, because it was a language beyond words that you didn't need, but you could feel the power and the love of connecting with the planet that way. There may be times as you go through DNA activation that you begin to feel a kick of that come up, and you just feel like, wow. It's like this energy rush that comes into you that you feel the beginnings of your greatness, of what it meant to be a great avatar being. So there are going to be times when you're pulled this way and pulled that way, and emotions are doing this and they're doing that, and you kind of need to sit back and allow. Be godlike with it. Okay, well, allow that. The emotions know what they're doing. They're trying to clear themselves. If you feel like throwing something or whacking somebody, try to point it at something that's not going to be harmed, But be prepared for it. Okay, we'll go past this now, please, Seth. That's the 15-dimensional time matrix.
Yes, sub-frequency.
Yeah. Okay, this chart simply shows you the structure of sub-frequency bands. All right, we have, it didn't change the numbering on yet. There's a little flip that happens in the dimensional scale and the 15-dimensional time matrix that it has to do with expansion and contraction and reversals, but it really belongs in like a star level 3 or 4 to even worry about it because we don't use it. This chart was made when I was playing with it at that level, like trying to put the teaching together. So this is why you have 1, 4, 3, 2, 5. It means the same thing as 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. All right? It's just showing that you have 1 here, you have 2, and 3, and wait, no, 3, then 4, then 5. There's a mathematical thing that was happening there. So on this chart, just realize each one of these is a harmonic universe. Okay, dimensions 1, 2, 3. Okay, these are actually, I need to change this chart. I just looked at this, without using the other system and showing you where the 15-dimensional matrix plugged in with their certain reversals, this actually is very confusing. I'm looking at this and wait a minute, that isn't right, these aren't right. This would be the harmonic universe, yeah, that is harmonic universe 4. Let me see what this is. I haven't used this chart in a while, by the way, this one. It kind of got stuck in there to illustrate the concept of sub-frequency bands. Yeah, actually it isn't too bad. All right, I'm confusing it with another chart that had a whole set of numbers here that had to do with counting kilons. All right, because there's a different number of kilons, which are the primary codes. Remember, kilons are 3-dimensional groupings of particuli. They form three-dimensional particuli grids. They form kilons, and kilons group together to form more crystallization called kilon codes. Later we'll learn that means fire letters. We'll learn the term fire letters, and some of you might have heard of the word fire letters in relation to DNA. So I was just trying to look at this and see that's not the chart with the fire letters on it. What this one means is harmonic universe 1 is dimensions 1, 2, and 3. It's actually density level 1. Has 12 subfrequency bands for each one, so there's 36 primary subfrequency bands there. Now if you add all these up, they each have 12 subfrequency bands in them. So you get 180 subfrequency bands, 12 times 15, running there. And then you have another set of them running in the antiparticle universe. Okay? So you have 15 dimensions here and another 15 there. You have the 180 subfrequency bands here and another 180 there. You get a spherical reality field. Okay? Yeah, this isn't that important. Okay, let's go to the... Yeah, and this one shows you just the density levels that go with it, the matter density levels. Okay. shows you the dimension number, the harmonic universe number, and the density and the type of matter, which is kind of interesting, right? Harmonic universe 1, where we are, dimensions 1, 2, and 3. We have carbon-based biology. It's considered physical or gross matter density, where carbon, the biological life forms here, are built on a carbon base. This is why they do carbon dating to test things and those kind of things. The molecules, carbon molecules, are an intrinsic part of the life field on Earth and in density 1 systems. When we get up to density 2, and that means if we had strands 4, 5, and 6 fully activated all the time, and that was the flash line sequence running through our bodies, we wouldn't be here anymore. We'd be in harmonic universe 2. That has a carbon-silica-based biology, where the carbon is starting to transmute into silica crystals, which is like crystal. As we move up, it gets more and more silica-based. We are crystalline life forms, and that progressively begins to show itself the higher up the density scale we go, the higher dimensional scale we go. In harmonic universe 3, dimensions 7, 8, and 9, this is the semi-etheric. This is the etheric state of matter that we talked about yesterday. Silica-based biology. That means literally crystal beings, crystalline matter form, where right now we have carbon molecules in our matter manifestation. When you get up to harmonic universe 3, you are dealing with a matter form that doesn't have carbon molecules in it anymore, which makes it very different from here. There are beings in these reality fields that look like, I've met a few of them too, that look like, it's amazing to even think of them as intelligent beings, and they're a lot more intelligent than we are because their body forms are capable of holding more than what we can hold right now. But they look like spirals of crystals, crystal fibers. They don't have feet and arms and heads like we do. They're living crystalline matrices, some of them. There are also beings that look like very ghostly crystalline hominids, and that's what our race looks like up there as we get into the etheric matter and then go into the pre-matter beyond it. We get into pre-matter, dimensions 10, 11, 12, that's the Christos levels, crystalline liquid light. So it goes from being silica crystals, hard stuff, into those crystals start to melt and dissolve. So it's a crystalline liquid light. It's called hydroplasm. And then in D13, 14, and 15, when we fully expand our bodies to become our Rishi cells again, they're standing wave patterns. It's our flame body. It's made of antimatter, gaseous light. And then when we move out of the time matrix, we go back to vibrating units of sound, progressively demanifest. So these are the matter density levels that go with the dimensional structure and the harmonic universe structure. Now this little diagram over here illustrates the 5 harmonics of manifestation in one 15-dimensional time matrix. When we showed you the 15-dimensional matrix to show you where the dimensions fit, it looked like this kind of pie in the sky thing, and here's one circle, here's another, here's another, here's another. That was to show you, so you could see strung out, where the dimensional correspondences were. The way each of those reality fields, those spherical reality fields exist, they're nested. Okay? You'd have like 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. Harmonic universe 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. Which means we're in here. To get out here, you don't have to move over there. You need to expand. So the process of getting ourselves out of density is the reverse of the process we used to get ourselves into density, which was to contract ourselves. Once we were at one with God, we contracted ourselves to get in here. Now we expand ourselves to get out. And that expansion is a physical process of energy, and physical referring to all of the physical levels all the way up in the time matrix. Any manifest level that has matter has a level of physicality to it. It might not be physicality like we know it. So we expand back out, and we can ascend by literally bringing back the frequencies and the flash line sequences of the higher dimensional fields back into our body matter. And that's what we're beginning to learn to do with Kathara healing. Okay? Next.
Just to check some logistics.
Right.
On the point of starting universal and planetary Kathara,
Yeah.
right?
Yeah.
It's 12:30 now. Do they want to have a break for 15 minutes? And how do you want to run the next
I would
hour
rather
or
get
two?
through this and then do like lunch instead of break and then lunch.
So
and
we'll
that
go
kind of
lunch
stuff.
at 2 o'clock then, really.
Let's get through this section. All right, you guys still, you don't want to do a break yet, do you? You all right? Thank you. Yes, I'd like to get through the Kathara grids and where we can start chapter 2 after lunch.
Yeah.
We didn't talk about what time we were going to do the lunch break.
No, we're just
Usually what I do when I do the long days is I have like a 15-minute break, then a regular lunch break, then a 15-minute afternoon break and the thing. But I think I'm going to try to combine them and probably get rid of the 15-minute ones and just do lunch, and then we'll do, dinner or whatever, if you don't mind. Okay? All right. Now we get into some interesting stuff. This is where we begin to explore the core of the templates. We know that there's part A, part and part. We know they form standing wave units. We know standing columnar waves. We know that those standing columnar scalar waves go in groups that form different dimensionalized structures of matter. We know we have flashline sequences that are the things that govern the speed at which the dimensions flash on and off. Now, there is a series of levels. If it was just the levels we've talked about, we'd all just be sitting in a bunch of flashing on and off waves, and we wouldn't see the hologram of matter. So there's these series of templates that build up from those primal units. Now the primal units of part I, part K, part Chem form standing scalar waves that are crystalline waves, because groups of part units come together, form part grids, and then form three-dimensional part grids, which form chelons. So we are talking, this is why this is called chelontic science. All right? These chelons that are the crystalline morphogenetic blueprints upon which all templates manifest, including the 15-dimensional matrix. There is a core mathematical program that controls the formation of chelons, that controls and holds the mathematical program of the universal template, of the cosmic template within which the smaller universal templates exist, and right down into every microcosmic aspect of creation. You will have the same core mathematical program. The hologram is built on a base 12 mathematical system, which means there are 12 primary unit programs that control the manifestation and the mathematical relationships between all of the different particles and their formation. Now, there's something called a Cathara grid. Cathara is it's a word derived from a longer Anahazi word that means light, sound, one. Light, sound, and one, or unity, referring to one source. Okay, so ka, light, ta, sound, ra, one. The sound tones ra were used, before they got abused by the Egyptians, to mean the one. But then it got all twisted in Egyptian times and used to mean many different things that had nothing to do with the one. All right, so Cathara means light, sound, one, source, grid. It is the first level of Partakai structure, the first level of the scalar grid that gets organized mathematically. It's the first mathematical program. It is the core holographic template upon which morphogenetic field blueprints are structured. That means there is a foundation, core level, that sets and controls the programs for all the other levels that are built upon it. You have a Cathara grid level. Now, if we look at the 15-dimensional time matrix, and you have these 15 flashline sequences, there's something that synchronizes all these. They start someplace, and they start with one point of frequency vibration placed in first each of the 12 dimensions, and then there is another set. There are two Cathara grids in the universal Cathara, and I'll show you what a Cathara grid is in a minute. The first one goes from dimension 1 to dimension 12. Actually, first, depending on if you're going out or incoming. If you were coming down from source, the first one extends from the Akkadic energy matrix sound fields through the 3 levels of the sound fields there, and then down into dimension 13. You would get 12 points of consolidated frequency that form the primal light and sound fields. And then there is another reflection of that forms D12 down to D1. These are, in each dimensional level, there would be one point where the original mathematical program that was supposed to control all of the mathematical relationships in that dimension was placed in. So you have 12 points of frequency, and they have very specific relationships to each other, their own mathematical relationships to each other. We can begin to understand this mathematical program enough without being a computer programming expert and having to know all about, using numbers. There's a way to understand this in a way that is very usable, in a way we can use those 12 points of frequency that are the core of every template as a map to know what frequency to run, a map to understand what our body systems are built on, a map to know where to reprogram what from, and when we go into Templar courses, like next weekend, it is literally the Universal Stargate map. And it shows you where what is located, like where gates are and everything. But it exists in the body as well, called the Cathara grid. The Cathara grid is the core holographic template for dimensionalization of the unified field. So it is literally what holds the program, the mathematical program, for dimensionalization itself. All those complex coordinates that allow sets of 15 dimensions to flash at the right sequences, at the right time, in the right way, at the right angles to each other. All of that program is held in 12 points from D1 to 12, and 12 more points from D13 up to the acadic level of the primal sound fields. Okay? There are 3 primary levels to the Cathara grid. You have level 1, it's called the 12-tree grid, and you'll see why in a minute, and it's probably something you've seen before. Okay, level 1, the 12-tree grid, which has Cathara centers and Cathara lines on it. That is the first level. That's the first 12 points, and the lines, flash lines that begin to connect those points. There's level 2, which is called the crystal seals grid. And this has part of it as Huva bodies and scalar shields. These are part of the anatomy you probably haven't heard of in about probably at least 10,000 years. So you're going to get a refresher course on this one. Then level 3 is called the dyadic point grid. It's a system of black and white hole sets that build on top of the other 2 levels. These are the beginnings of how energy, as primal current, comes in from source, contracts into the time matrix. First it takes on the form of the first set of 12 mathematical programs in the level 1 Cathara grid, and then the next set of 12. We're going to be working with the set from D1 up to 12 first before we worry about the higher level ones. It then takes on more of that imprint and takes on the crystal seals level. And this is where we get Huva bodies, which are bubbles of energy that we get to walk around on. And it's because the way those bubbles of energy, electromagnetic energy, bend light and consciousness and sound, that we get the ability to project out through our consciousness what looks like a 3-dimensional hologram that's quite solid. Or at least it appears to be. Okay. The dyadic point grid, this gets fun, because when we first get into it, we're not going to talk too much about it. That's more a part of what would be Cathara level 3. But the new stuff that we're getting gets more into this. Dyadic points have to do with Merkaba. They have to do with Merkaba fields and understanding what they are and why they're important. So these are the 3 basic levels. We're going to learn how to use the Cathara level 1 12-tree grid, and we're going to learn a bit about the crystal seals grid, because more and more the Cathara work and the ascension work that we're getting with the Dance of Life program coming out is getting into understanding the crystal seals and Huva bodies, particularly crystal seals, because these are things, areas in our body that hold frequency in a specific way. They control the Merkaba fields. They control the way consciousness moves into the body and how much of it can. And right now, we're in an amazing period of time. Because our bodies are indelibly connected to the planet, whether we like it or not, we are going through a Stargate opening cycle, literally, between the year 2000 and 2012. That means Stargate frequencies are activating in the planetary grids. A full 12-dimensional activation has not occurred here, with all 12 Stargates opening. Has not occurred here for over 200,000 years. In the Atlantean period, they had Gate 5 open, and they created a real mess. What happens to the people and the beings and the things on a planet during a Stargate cycle is their DNA responds to the frequency. So whether or not you ever take a Cathara course, your DNA is going to activate, whether or not it's ready to hold the frequency. The world is in for a rush. That's kind of putting it mildly. Yeah, we're going to have the whole world having hot flashes in a couple of years. You know? They're going to find out that men can do menopause too. Because a lot of the feelings that women have DNA that draws in a little faster, where men have DNA that throws out a little faster. So there's a transmitter and a receiver. We're both a little bit better at, where our DNA is characteristic of. We both transmit and receive. But women tend to pick up the changes first. A lot of stuff that's being said, that, this is menopause, it's this new word that modern science in the last 100 years has invented called menopause, when it has, our hormones do all sorts of weird things, and we get like hot flashes and can't sleep at night, and our bone density is supposed to go down, and all this kind of horrible stuff that we have to look forward to after we turn 40. A lot of this is being mistaken. What is really happening is DNA activation. The DNA has been activating for the last 100 years, slowly, little pulses of it, but slowly climbing. Since January 2000, DNA is coming home with a vengeance. It's saying we've been sleeping too long, and the planet is sending the frequencies up through the grids, and those frequencies are coming up through our biosystems that we'll learn about soon. And it's triggering DNA activation. Now, right now, the species has really messy distortions in the DNA templates, which means it's going to amplify disease in people who don't know how to clear it. It means it's going to have all sorts of wacky feelings happening in your body, even when you're working with Cathara. But when you're working with Cathara, you're clearing stuff. You're getting stuff out of the way, so your activations will go naturally. But if you say, oh, this is too heavy for me, I don't want to do DNA activation, well, unless you have a space shuttle out of here, you don't have a choice. The planet is doing DNA activation. Plants are going to be responding in their own way. Animals are responding. Crystals are responding in the planetary grids. There are changes that are occurring. And there are some of them that science is aware of and going, whoa, what's that? I don't know what that is. I don't know. That's not supposed to do that. No, it isn't, is it? What does it mean? I don't know. Do you know? This is some of the things that are happening, particularly in the underground science movements. They're aware of weird stuff going on, and they can't explain it. And at least, this is why they're called radicals, because at least if they can't explain something, they think they have something to learn. And they don't immediately pretend it doesn't exist. Where mainstream science tends to say, if it's not in our books, it's not real, right? Which means you can't learn anything. So there are changes happening now. You may have had some of them. Sometimes there's cycles of bone pain, where just your bones hurt, not just your joints, but your joints and your bones. Sometimes there's a good old tailbone kick, where you walk around for a week feeling like somebody kicked you in the tailbone. This is where your craniosacral seals are starting to activate, which implies that on the other end of the tailbone, in your head, you may be having pain. There may be cycles of headaches that come. There may be cycles of vision, either getting better or much worse for no apparent reason. There may be cycles of hearing, increasing or decreasing. You may start to hear inner voices, but you can't hear things outside anymore for a while. Right now, what people are going to start going through, if they went to modern medicine and modern psychiatry to help them, they better build some really, really big mental hospitals, because we'd all be in them. You know? People are going to start having the whites of their eyes activate to where they're seeing more of the interdimensional spectrum. Did you see that? No, I didn't, but I did. I saw that too. Was it? Are we crazy? No. You know, we have these conversations with people. You can tell there's people out there seeing UFOs right now. And there's 99% of the population, oh, they don't exist. You know, yeah, right. What about our scalar shields and the planetary scalar shields? But these are the templates of energy. If you look at primal life force current as is contracting in, as if source is breathing energy into this time matrix. It breathes in and it goes through all of these structures to get into manifestation. The consciousness that we have that gives us the ability to say, I am aware, that is coming through from the primal life force currents, the creation currents. It's coming through these structures to get here where you can perceive yourself as being here. It's the same primal life force frequency and consciousness that's allowing your body to manifest. So we're going to learn about the scalar shields and the crystal seals, because these are they're built on the Cathara level 1 template below them, but they begin to regulate and differentiate energy in much more specific ways. If we all just used a Cathara grid template, everything in the whole universe would look the same. The whole hologram would have no differentiation or individuation of form or of identity. So we have the Cathara grid core structures that everybody has, and then progressive mathematical programs are added to them, layers, that give us individuation, that allows one dimension to have a different pattern than another mathematically, so there's a differentiation between them. It allows the difference between a sun and a planet and a star and a person and an ant. It's the differentiation in template that progressively builds up from the common 12 points of a Cathara grid. So we have Cathara level 2, planetary scalar shields, and seals. These are the next level of the regulatory systems that allow energy to begin to take on specific mathematical programs, so we have our individuation. The level 3 Cathara grid is made of sets of minute white and black hole energy vortices. They're made of interdimensional scalar wave spectra that regulate the flux of consciousness and energy between dimensional, harmonic, and parallel antiparticle systems. So there's a connection of energy, like little vortices of energy, little spirals of energy, that connect us not only vertically, to the other parts of our consciousness that are stationed in the higher dimensional fields. But they also connect us horizontally to our antiparticle self, to our doppelganger, our double. It gets really weird when you start to integrate your double, because you realize there's another you that looks a lot like you that might have dyed its hair another color, but because it had free will too, that took a line of development in a planet that's similar to this, but not exact. But parallel Earth has had some problems. They have experienced a major invasion there. ETs are very real in their world, and they're terrified of them because they run the place. So when you start to integrate your DNA and it starts to activate, you may start to get strange memories. Where are these ideas coming from? I have a sci-fi movie going on in my head. You know, you may dream it instead, because usually things will begin to come through in the dream state first before they come through anywhere else. And we're protected with our own avatar consciousness. It's not going to let so much bleed through come through that you get flattened in this life because what's coming through from one of the other reality fields. So your avatar level will balance it. But parallel Earth situation it's a really dire situation there for a lot of people. Okay, yes, excuse me.
Can we help them?
Hey, what?
Can
Can we help parallel? It's a big question. I talk about that a little in the Templar workshop. The dynamics of what that would mean to help there without getting ourselves ensnared in it are massive. However, they are helping us. They are the ones that have helped to make the bridge where this information could be brought in so we could understand what we needed to do in the drama so we didn't get stuck. Now what's happening is being taken care of as far as what's on parallel. The consciousness of the people there, many of them have dropped their bodies to get out so they don't get trapped. But that is we can help by just knowing that they're there and knowing that we all have an avatar self that connects. You and your double are connected to each other, to each other through your avatar matrix. That self, your higher self, or both of you, will help to guide you, and you'll be able to help. What you're doing here may actually be directly helping the one over there, but you don't know it. So we are helping as far as can we help. There's a lot we can do here. That's what the Templar course is about, as far as helping, understanding what the problem is, first of all, because the parallel Earth issue is only a small one compared to what's going on here. We got our own basket full of mess here to take care of. It's not hard to handle if you know energy and if you know how to play with the vortices in your body and the vortices on the planet. Okay, now, getting into the cosmic morphogenetic structure is built upon interwoven Cathara grids and the dimensionalized scalar standing wave templates they form. This means that from the cosmic level, which when I say cosmic, it's different than when I say universal. When I say cosmic, I'm referring to stuff that includes the primal sound fields, the energy matrix. When I say universal, I'm referring to either a universal time matrix that has 5 harmonic universes in it or one of those universes within it. So universe, you have basically planet, person, planet, galaxy, universe, and cosmos. So there's a difference between cosmos and universe when we talk about them, and then source, of course. All right, we're going to show you 2 diagrams that, to begin with, that start the understanding of the Cathara grid. And this may look similar to something you've seen before. For anybody that has studied the Kabbalah, this was an image that was used in a reversed form, interestingly. Numbers were running in reverse. In the Kabbalah, it only had 10 centers on it. This diagram shows you the 3-dimensional representation. Now remember I told you symbols, that symbols hold the mathematical programs. If we have a triangle, remember I talked about a triangle, that is a mathematical signature that holds specific mathematical programs. So we can use the symbol to direct the energy. When we are seeing these diagrams, they're not just something I created to illustrate something. They are diagrams that were set in the original texts of the Founders' teachings because they are the symbol codes themselves that hold that whole mathematical representation. When we look at this isn't something you're going to see hanging in the sky. What it actually is the mathematical program translated into a 3-dimensionally perceivable image. When we use that symbol, we are using the Cathara grid. We are going to the core template of the grid. So literally, seeing the graphs themselves as they were done eons ago by the Founders' races, where they were externalized, so we could actually look at that, and the symbols themselves will start teaching us. We will start having things in consciousness open up just by looking at them, by being exposed to them, because they're sending us frequency. Now this is called a Cathara 12-tree grid. It's a level 1 Cathara grid, and that's the first level that we're going to learn to use to begin to bring in the D12 Christos Maharata consciousness. The Maharata ray is what the D12 frequency is called. The Maharata is a word that's drawn, again, from the Anahazi language, the first verbal translation, externalized verbal translation of the actual energy signature that is that frequency. Now, what's interesting is when we have a word like Maharata, it refers to the D12 consciousness, the D12 frequency that comes down from the divine blueprint. That word itself would have a light translation, so there would be symbols that represent that as well. And we'll get into that because we're going to use one of those symbols that are the visual translation of the sonic translation that's called Maharata, and they're all translations of the mathematical encoding of the consciousness of that particular dimensional field. Now, this Kathara grid is going to be a key to lots and lots of things. This is located in your body as well, and there are very specific points on the body that correspond to those 12 points of frequency. When you know where those points are, you can begin to learn to run frequency in a way that you can begin to reset your divine blueprint, which means reset what your D12 mathematical program was when you first came into the time matrix. You can reset it. Each one of these centers corresponds to one dimensional grid, or one flashline sequence. Center 1 connects to D1. Center 2 connects to D2. 3 to D3. Okay? Now 12 connects to D12. All right. The process of bringing in the frequency of your D12 Maharata crystal's current means you have to bring it through and down into the Kathara grid. Now, there's two ways you can do this. There's various ways you can do it. One of the ways we're going to learn is, and what you're going to learn tomorrow is a client session, where after we learn how to run this stuff with ourselves, we're going to learn how to run it for somebody else. You can run it through the top of the head. You can run the D12 current through the top of the head, through the Kathara grid inside the body, or from the feet. We tend to start from the feet. Now, this right now is just an image that hangs there. If you can realize that this is not just a thing that exists within your body, but it also exists within everything manifest in this time matrix, in any time matrix, because it is the base core mathematical program. That means this is the first layer of how energy is in consciousness is going to circulate in the system, in the hologram. This is what gives us our 12-dimensional fields. Each one of these, now I'll talk about the other 3 that go with the primal sound fields in a minute, but our first 12-dimensional fields, D1 through 12, each one of these centers, called Kathara centers or Kathara spheres, holds the whole mathematical program for that dimensional field. When it comes to biological life forms, it also holds the whole program for their genetics, for their DNA template. So when you begin to work with the Kathara centers in the Kathara grid on a being or a planet, you are literally going in to the core programming centers, like the heart of the computer program. That could be scary if we were given technologies that we could make decisions and accidentally make messes with, or if we were putting knowledge on the planet that crazy people that call themselves scientists and warriors might adopt to try to hurt people with. The reason we can use these technologies right now is because any of the technologies that require using the higher dimensional frequencies and knowing the subtle anatomy of persons, planets, and things requires the use of D12 frequency to activate and open. You can't access this template in anything without D12 frequency. D12 frequency is the Christos frequency that is not polarized. A being that is in polarity consciousness, that is using twisted idea forms, cannot fully run D12 frequency. Because if a person was running D12 frequency, they would not have the twists in the consciousness in that way. Now, the decision, it simply comes to this. If a person wanted to say be bad, say, I know I'm an anti-Christos person, I want to, run a bad agenda here. I'm going to learn these technologies to hurt people, with them. Well, they can have that nasty intention if they want to, but it's not going to change the fact that they have to do something called activating their Maharic seal in order to get that frequency into the body where they can use any of this technology anyway. That means they have to, at least at those moments when they want to try to run it, they have to run divine blueprint current, whether they like it or not, or they can't run the frequencies. So there's a built-in protection with this. You can't harm yourself with it. If you are trying to do an intention or trying to make something happen that is not in your divine blueprint or somebody you're working with, the avatar level of you or that person will override it, simply. There is the original intentions of every being every person, you and anybody else, is encoded within the universal, for our time matrix, the universal divine blueprint. We have a planetary divine blueprint as far as how the planet was supposed to evolve, ideally. There is species divine blueprints. There are personal divine blueprints. When you run D12 frequency, it is automatically aligning, mathematically, all of the dimensional levels for the moment that you're running it. It is aligning you with the divine blueprint. The more you run the D12 currents, the more of the divine blueprint you will reset in your being, and the more you will hold the consciousness of Christos consciousness, which is unity consciousness. A being that's in full unity consciousness can still get hopping mad at something, but mad moves through in a way. It doesn't stick, because you understand the lesson behind it, but you also understand the emotion, and that letting it move is all right, but you won't hurt someone with it. You'll also understand that no matter how awful or bad or horrendous somebody is, you still love them. It doesn't mean you let them walk all over you either. You learn soft love and you learn tough love when necessary. Excuse me, no, you're not going to do that. That's not nice. You're going to hurt you and me? I don't think so. So you learn how to balance power as you work with these frequencies. So this Kathara grid is going to be the key to many things. It's going to be the key to learning how and where to run frequency in the body for a Maharic recoding process session, which is the beginning of recoding your core template. It is also, for people that are taking the Templar course, this, believe it or not, is a Stargate map. Once you know where in the galaxies each one of those dots corresponds to, you've got a map. And you've also got what are called Kathara lines, which are the connection areas between them. Now in the body, that implies there are spots in your body that hold these programs, and there are lines that run between them, which means one program can speak to the other. So the information can speak to each level of your consciousness, because you have part of your consciousness stationed here, here, and here. They can all communicate with each other through the Kathara lines. When you take it into the macrocosm, you will find that each of these represent 12 primary stargates that exist in our time matrix. And there's lots of little stargates that come off them, but they're the main ones. And these are the main conduits between them. And each one of these places has a name as far as the star systems that have been identified out there, that we've identified out there. We're very much in the center of all this. Earth is one of the main stargate areas. That's why our race got in trouble 25,000 years ago. Now, this is a little hard to see because I had to squish it up, okay? And by the way, these aren't computer graphics. Most of them are hand-drawn things and done with little tiny pieces of paste up that take forever and ever because I'm not that great at computer graphics. So they might not be perfect, but I hope you can appreciate the effort and the time that went into trying to prepare these. All right, this one shows you a 15-dimensional time matrix, right? Remember that oval shape, 15-dimensional time matrix, dimension 1 through 12. Then we have dimension 13, 14, and 15, primal light fields, right? And then the levels of the sound fields, and then source here. So what you really have in terms of Kathara grids, those core programs, those core maps of how the shape the energy takes as it comes in, you have the first 12 go from D1 to 12. Then you have another set where number 1 on this second grid would be where 12 is there. So they link together. So you have here the primal light fields connect to the dimensional fields, to the full dimensional fields. These are where the flash lines start to flash. These are where the flash lines just stay on, and these are where they just stay off. If you are going to do ascension, if you're going to literally take your body and your memory out with you, so when you get home to God, you'll remember that you went. That's really the difference. You either go back as space dust, or you go back as somebody who remembers that they were somebody when they came in. I mean, you can't not go back to God, is what I'm saying. It's just the quality of the experience that makes it worth trying. You know? The process of ascension would be the process of moving through these stargates, because these are energy centers, but they are also energy opening and closing points, energy interface points, where in the planetary Templar and in the universal Templar and the galactic Templar, they operate as stargates, opening and closing areas where energy can pass through from one dimension to another or from one harmonic to another. So you have 12. If you're going to ascend and you want to get out of the dimensionalized systems where you have three-dimensional hologram, because once you start to get up in here in the primal light fields, you don't have a three-dimensional hologram in quite the same way. It's much more internalized, and you can still make pictures, in your consciousness, but you know there's no such thing as you having a body outside of you. But if somebody down here saw you, you'd look like flaming gas, right? Like balls of flaming gaseous light, like suns. But these would be in the universal and galactic and planetary context. These Cathara grids, Cathara Grid 1 and Cathara Grid 2, are stargates that you'd have to go through these. If you were down here in density 1, you could go out through density 2, you could go out through 3, or you could go out through 4, but you'd have to find your way up to get out of the stargate systems. Now, to go through a gate, you would have to have the encoding of that gate in your DNA template, or your body form would explode in your consciousness fragment if you tried to pass through it, if you didn't have the coding in your body. Everybody that comes into the time matrix picks up all of these mathematical programs that are stored in each one of those centers. And that is our core template that literally our morphogenetic field is built on before we even have a DNA template. And then later, as we become biological, our DNA template is encoded with those mathematics that become chemical and elemental combinations within the body. So the two Cathara grids, this shows you how 1 through 12 links here, and then the primal light fields start another. There's another 12 points on this one. They actually both look like this, but I had to squash that one up a little to fit it on the diagram, but they're both shaped like this. That is a classic Cathara level 1 12-tree grid, and it's inside everybody and everything. Rocks even have them. Okay, we'll go on to the next one, please, Lovey. I think I wanted to put that
You
one.
want to go back to the words?
I think I did, yeah.
Or do you want to go to this one?
Yeah, I want to go on this one quick, because I think there's some I want to cover on that. I'll be thorough. Okay. Oops, can you drop it down just a little, please? Thank you. Okay. The 5 primary scalar templates of dimensionalization are formed on scalar shields composed of sets of 3 dimensions, which form 5 3-dimensional spheres of energy called Huva bodies. That's a mouthful. What does that mean, right? The diagram will help. We will see the diagram soon on this. This is where we can start talking about level 2 of the Cathara grid. We have the Cathara grid level 1, and if you want to conceptualize what that Cathara grid looks like inside of something, picture chelons. Picture this structure made out of little crystals of what look like frozen light, because that's what chelons look like. The Partakai units that build up to 3-dimensional structures called chelons, and they build up to form chelon codes, which are more complex crystalline structures. Imagine that 12th tree Cathara grid is inside of you, inside of all things, and it exists as a crystal structure. Very pretty, actually. Now, on that crystal structure, it holds the program for more crystalline structures to build. We start out as crystal. This is why humans have always, for eons, had a very special relationship with crystals. There's a consciousness in the elements of crystals that a part of us knows very well, because we're made of that too. So there's you can work with crystals and you can understand their consciousness, because you actually have a part of that consciousness within your own body. So if you picture that level 1 Cathara grid as a crystalline grid within your body, the next level of crystalline grid that forms, it's still made of chelons, is the level 2 grid. And this is where we get things called scalar shields, which are really little crystalline units, chelon units, that form scalar grids, more little flash line sequences. We start out with each dimension having its own set of flash line sequences, but then within any one of those light bulbs, you can make a million new little light bulbs as long as you use the program from that one. This is where form differentiation can take place. Now, the shields are the things where differentiation begins. We have the universal shield, which would have all the mathematical programs of the Cathara grid, and everything in the whole universe that ever passed through here in differentiation would be encoded in the universal shield for our time matrix. But there are actually a set of shields, one for each density level, one for harmonic universe 1, harmonic universe 2, 3, 4, and 5. And then there's a cosmic shield that all the time matrices, all many, many, many infinite, too many to count ones, are encoded into the cosmic shield. Now, the planetary shields are, again, they're 5 shields. We're going to work with 4 of them at first, which would be the ones that correspond to dimensions 1 through 12. The shields are the next stage up from Cathara level 1. They're a crystalline grid that is another grid through which energy circulates. If you look at pure raw energy coming in, pure consciousness coming in from source, first it comes through a Cathara grid just to get itself in to the dimensional framework. From there, it wants to become something individual. So it takes on more differentiation. It takes on another mathematical pattern on top of, but's built out of, the original 12 tree grid mathematical pattern. But it takes those mathematics and can combine them in all sorts of ways. In our shields, in a planetary shield, it holds the very particular evolutionary blueprints that were put in for that planet. Every person has a set of shields as well. What's interesting is the shields are where they are the parts of our anatomy that hold our individuated stations of consciousness here and also up the densities. We have a personal shield that corresponds to dimension 1, 2, and 3. We have our soul shield that corresponds to dimensions 4, 5, and 6, where our D4, 5, 6 consciousness is stationed. We have an oversoul shield, an avatar shield, a Rishik shield. These are parts of our subtle body anatomy, and I'll show you a diagram that helps to conceptualize that soon. They're important to understand because from the mathematical programs of individuation that are held within the shields of a planet or a person, there are circulations of energy that are directed into manifestation, where flash line sequences are taught to act a certain way toward each other that will create certain effects. The first effect is the creation of what's called a Huva body. Huva, it refers to a light sound grid. It's a three-dimensional, made of three different flash line sequences, circulation of energy, an effective energy that is created because the flash lines, the little flashing on and off scalar waves in a shield, are telling energy particles, units of consciousness, the primal life force currents, telling them to work in a certain way toward each other. And that way makes them create spheres of energy. This has to do with Merkaba mechanics as well. Creating spirals of energy and putting one spiral this way and another this way creates a space in between the two that creates an electromagnetic domain that makes a sphere of energy within which manifestation can take place. Now, the Huva bodies, there are 5 Huva bodies in one time matrix. A Huva body is something that would surround a whole universe. This is where if you went out forever and ever and ever and ever to the limits of space, you would find that space starts to bend, and so does time. Where your clocks would start doing weird stuff, and where magnetics would do things that you wouldn't think they would normally do, as if you were going around a curve. Because you are. There is the Huva body programming, where we're actually living within elliptical shaped spheres. Spheres within spheres within spheres. So, each universe has a sphere, a set of, well, let's take one harmonic universe, okay? Because remember, there's 5 harmonic universes, so when I'm saying one sphere, I'm actually talking about sets of 5 of them. But let's say harmonic universe 1, where we live, okay? The whole universe has a sphere of energy around it that contains it and creates it as an electromagnetic domain. The shields hold, they're the crystalline grid that holds the mathematical instructions that allow those circulations of energy to take place that allow that sphere to form. So we have a universal sphere. Now, the planets and galaxies within that sphere. Every galaxy would have its own sphere around it, a Huva body around it. Each planet in each galaxy would have a Huva body around it. And each person, each plant, each animal, each rock, everything on the planets, you have a Huva body around you. This is where we start to understand what our auric field is, that word that's been really popular for especially about 100 years in metaphysical societies about things like that energy field around you. What is that? Where does it come from? This is the beginning of the formation of that on a personal level. A planet has an auric field too. So does a galaxy, so does a universe, so does a time matrix. We're really living in sets of spheres from the universal level all the way down to the personal level. Okay. So that will be level 2. We'll talk about that a little bit. And what's interesting, some of the things that are coming through at the end of the new information that's coming through is dealing with a part of the Huva bodies that they didn't address here in the earlier parts, but it's called the radial body. And the radial body is something that I'll introduce tomorrow toward the end, that I'm really excited about the information that comes through, because this is getting into the part of thought manifestation, where we start to understand at least the parts that are involved with how does this part of our mind get to manifest something, and why whenever you try to manifest something it rarely comes out the way you want it, and what can you do about that. We're starting to get into this. But if we need to understand first what Huva bodies are, basically, they're the spheres of energy that form from the mathematical programs of the scalar shields, which can be visualized as crystalline shields, disks, crystalline disks of energy that hold the mathematical template, and all of those are built on the Cathara level 112 tree grid underneath them, which is another crystalline structure that holds the mathematical patterns. All right, the Cathara grid and the multi-levels of the morphogenetic structure built upon it These are the causal element behind and within all manifestation. They are the core holographic template. So there's like you will take a Cathara grid back down to the units that form it. That's where you go from Cathara grid to kilons to Partakai units to Partakai and Partakam to Partakai to nothing source. Okay, when we're moving backward out of manifestation. So these are literally a stage in the manifestation process, and they're a part of our anatomy that we carry with us all the time. We have shields and we have Huva bodies. Our shields and Huva bodies connect to the planetary shields and Huva bodies. That's how we get energy into our bodies. Once we're on a planet, the universal Huva bodies and shields and Cathara grid send frequency down into the galactic one, then from the galactic one into the planetary one. From the planetary one, the energy is passed through into all the life forms on the planet through their own set of corresponding subtle body anatomies. So there is always an intimate relationship taking place between persons, planets, galaxies, and Source. We will have more of Source energy within us and more of Source consciousness within us if we can open up all of the conduits that are available to allow more of Source frequency to flow through. Because frequency is energy, and energy is conscious. That means all energy, even the things that science says that's energy, but that's not a person. It's a person. I always ask, who is it? Because it's kind of like Horton Hears a Who, that little book they used to have for kids. Yeah. What you think is an it may very well be a who. Energy, everything. Really, they're just like God is an it, but it's a who. It's definitely a sentient identity with intelligence and, its own will and creation and sentience. Energy, all energy has its own sentience. That means there's not a darn thing out there that's not conscious. That can be a real problem if you're trying to be a vegetarian because you figure it's really bad to eat animals, but it's better to eat plants because animals are closer to humans and they're more conscious and they're beings. Plants are kind of more like beings, but kind of raw material. There really is no raw material. It's all consciousness. It's all a manifestation of Source. So it all needs to be treated with respect and reverence. Right now we're stuck on a planet where we have to eat because our DNA is messed up. We used to be breatharians, by the way. We didn't have to eat. We had a very different internal structure at that point. There are certain organs that just weren't necessary. We were immortal in those bodies. And what allowed us to sustain those bodies were Merkaba mechanics. We would consciously direct what our energy fields were doing, so whenever our energy levels started to drop, we would bring more primal life force in. We didn't have to take energy from anything. We weren't energy vampires. Right now on the planet, we've been turned into energy vampires. We think of energy vampires in a negative sense was, those people that try to suck energy off other people. And there are nasty things in the astral field that try to do that. There are things that in the ancient legends they called succubi that try to attach themselves to your field and suck all your life force out. When you think about what we're doing on the planet, just to sustain our bodies, what do? We kill stuff to take its life force energy to sustain our own. That was not the natural pattern for humans or animals on this planet. That was not part of the divine blueprint. That has been an adaptation that was necessary once our currents were blocked and we couldn't sustain here. And we couldn't get back out. We had to do something in the meantime. And certain allowances were made and agreements were made between animal and plant forms that they agreed to allow us to do that because we would take into our bodies who they were and we would help them ascend out of here faster. So there's a whole other way of looking at food when you start to understand energy, when you start to understand what our templates are about and the fact that energy is conscious. When we are running currents, we are running people. Most of them ours, parts of our own. Now, every life force current that exists, if you were to approach it, there's two ways you can approach it. You can approach it as an it, as a thing that's not a person, or as a who. You will learn much, much more with every life force current you learn to work with every symbol code you learn to work with, if you treat it as a who and give it due respect. Say, okay, whoever you are, I honor you as a consciousness form. Please share with me what you know. You might be amazed. There are codes that we'll use in Cathara healing, symbol codes, that literally a part of our own consciousness exists in exactly that shape. If you were to meet that part of yourself, that's like parts that make up your body and your emotional body, if you were to meet your emotional body, if it was going to jump outside of you and stand there and look at you, it would be made of symbol shapes. it would look like a two-dimensional, geometrical, changing, moving mathematical program of light. And it would look at you and think, you look pretty strange too. But the thing is, there's no difference between the you that's here and that you. They're both you. They're both a part of you. So if we start to realize that everything carries consciousness, this is conscious, you can start to do neat little things like try to feel who your refrigerator is. They're about the hardest. Okay, you can go out and feel a plant, and you can actually, it might start telepathing to you, and you start to realize they talk and they know English. They're a lot smarter than we give them credit for. They're multilingual. But if you try to talk to refrigerators, the consciousness is a little harder to reach. You're going into core elemental consciousness that's been mutated and abused and turned into stuff it wasn't supposed to be. So you can feel it, and you can almost feel its pain and its deadness. There's like a deadness to it. But it won't usually talk to you telepathically. Okay. Anyway. Yeah. Some of the little tangents are really, really good because you won't find them in the book. Okay. Now, this is where we get into the healing part here. All manifest dis-ease, or a lack of ease, dis-ease, originates through distortions in the natural electrotonal programs, the Partakai unit arrangements, of the Kathara grid and the Huva body scalar shields. Any condition of disease, and that includes diseases of your bank account or your family history or anything. It's not just disease in your body, it's disease that's projecting out into your body into chaos events as well. Originates because there is something in the Kathara grid levels that are holding distortions that are no longer in line with the divine blueprint. Because if we were all following our divine blueprint, there's only very few of us there's a lot of people that take the argument that, oh, well, a lot of us come in, even if we're Ascended Masters, to have like really, really rough lives just to learn stuff. Hate to tell you, if you're an Ascended Master, you don't have to go in to have a really, really rough life to learn stuff. You just choose to learn stuff in a joyful manner. We tried that at once. People sometimes ask, how did humans, if all this mutation has taken place? And there's really, the game of victim-victimizer really isn't. How is it that we ended up getting victimized so badly? Why did we allow this to happen? Why did our race create this to happen? We had a really dumb idea once upon a time. That's how it happened. We had a part of our family way up there when we were the Christos races who made some really awful, horrendous decisions and turned themselves into things we couldn't even fathom how they possibly could act so horribly. Because they forgot about love, and they forgot about being nice, and they were going to destroy this time matrix. And we could not figure out, the nice ones that didn't make that twist, couldn't figure out what in the world could make a being be like that. We had no idea. We wanted to help, but we could. If you can't understand somebody or why they're acting off the wall and nuts, how can you help them? You just kind of in horror. Well, when we were founders races, the same people that are here now, we're founders races in those spaces in space-time. That's still going on right now in those spaces in space-time. There were groups that made some really bad decisions and got their gene codes all tied up in knots, which tied their consciousness up in knots. And they became very intelligent but very, very dangerous. They became an evil force. Now, evil is live spelled backwards or live spelled backwards. They became a force that was trying to destroy this time matrix rather than to support the original will of Source. We got ourselves into this mess because we asked a really dumb question. Was, how could they do stuff like this? How could they turn themselves into beings that could act that way? How could they possibly do this with themselves? Why can't they understand? Oh, that was the big one. Why can't they understand? What does it mean that their templates are messed up, that they can't understand? How could you forget your connection to God? How could they do that? You can't, I mean, we're literally up there going, they couldn't. You can't, forget your connection to God. I mean, it's common knowledge. Everybody knows that. Well, as a race, we decided to find out because we wanted to help the ones of our own kind that had gotten twisted in their genetic codes and twisted in their consciousness. We wanted to help, and we knew we didn't know how. How do you reach them? How do you fix them? They don't want to be fixed. That was the biggest problem. They decided they wanted to take over things. They wanted to, they were going to be God, which makes no sense if you understand God, because it doesn't work that way. You can't hijack part of God and like move it over here, especially when everything takes place in the same space. So it made no rational sense to us whatsoever of how their thought processes could be going the way they were that would make them consciously choose to take a stance against Source and against the Christos and against their own family who loved them very much. So we agreed to enter a similar type of experience where we allowed ourselves to become distorted, not fully, but enough that we could understand how they could kill each other, how they could act with hatred, how they could act unlovingly, and how they could walk around and forget what it meant to be a part of God. We allowed ourselves to take on the disease. And we've done a darn good job of it. We should be proud of ourselves. But now it's time that if we don't bring it back around, we're going to fall to it like other races who tried the same thing have done. We were a guardian race that came in and said, we have to fix this problem. And we were courageous. Oh, geez, it's like agreeing to have cancer so you can figure out how to cure it. It's like, thanks a lot. Like, do I really, really want to do that? Does it really mean that much to me to find a cure for this disease? It takes a lot of love to, on behalf of, if you're sitting there and you're fine, your templates are fine, and you're looking at this bunch of people who used to be your family who are acting like murderous, violent maniacs, you still love them because you know that you're all one and you're all part of the same Source, but they don't remember that anymore. All they want to do is kill you. It takes a lot of love, Christos love, to look at them and say, we've got to reach them somehow. They're fallen members of our own. No matter how bad they turn themselves into being, we still love them. And if we don't help them out, they're never going to get out. They're going to be space dust. And it's a shame because they had so much more potential than being space dust. Space dust isn't bad. But if you had the potential to be an avatar, if that's what your template was, it's really a shame to settle for space dust. You're a lot happier if you take your memory with you when you go home to God, because then you recognize that you are home with God and you recognize what a wonderful journey it was and you remember something from it. It's like, why bother going to Tahiti and seeing the beautiful scenery if you're going to come back and have your memory wiped? Why bother? When a race falls, which is what happened, a part of our races fell, and we wanted to help them. And this was before we were humans, by the way. We were Lyrans once upon a time. The Christos founders' races were Lyran. And the Lyran, there was a period of time called the Lyran Wars. It was 250 billion years ago in linear time terms. This is when it all started. So right now, what we're working through is finally, after many, many flashline sequences have been traveled, it's time to wake up and remember we were the healers. We were the ones that came in to fix this. And we've put ourselves among them. And right now they're taking over our planet, actually. The consciousness of what's called the fallen angelics has really run rampant here for 25,000 years. So now as we learn to wake up our Kathara centers and wake up our bodies and wake up our avatar selves, we'll also wake up to the fact that we were each a part of a cosmic mission. We were created, or we wouldn't be in, the body forms we're in. We were created to help heal this time matrix and to help bring those fallen families back before they destroyed the time matrix itself, because they were going to destroy the system. Because what they were doing and the ways they were using energy was going to make the whole system implode in on itself. And we were here to stop them from doing that, but stop them by bringing them back into healing, not by destroying them. So this is part of the drama that as we wake up in this century, this is part of what our job is. And as you start to understand a little bit more about yourself as a soul, what you came to do, you'll find that leads to understanding what as an oversoul you came to do, and then what as an avatar you came to do, which is where your galactic contract is, where you're not just involved with planetary healing. What you do here will affect galaxies. And that's when you start to feel the breath of what we're working with when we're working with Source. Okay, let's see. Okay, healing occurs through regenesis of the natural electrotonal programs of the holographic template. Now, if you have these sets of shields that I talked about, the scalar grids on the level 2 of the Kathara grid, the shields originally had a very specific program. There's one shield called the Maharic shield that is the one that's made out of Maharata current, or Mahara current, whichever you want to call it, which is D12 current. That's your divine blueprint. That shield held your individuation, whatever it is you were. If you were an ant, you'd have one too, but you would have a different mathematical program, obviously, or you'd be a person. You have a D12 shield. That shield originally set the mathematical templates for the 4 shields below. You have a Rishik shield, which is your primal light one, your first stage into the time matrix. And then from that, your divine blueprint emerged. Your divine blueprint, which is where your individuation started to come into being. See, before that, everybody else was part of a Rishik shield, and we were all conscious, but we were all like big suns and balls of light. We all looked the same, and we all thought the same. We all knew ourselves as divine expressions of Source, and we all knew that we wanted to explore what it would be like if we were different. So we decided to come into the time matrix. That's part of what the lessons were, that we just wanted to know what it would feel like to be in here. So after you come from the primal light fields, you have your divine blueprint level, and that is literally a shield. It is a crystalline structure built first upon the Kathara grid, which is anchoring in 12 points your consciousness into the dimensional field. Then there is putting the program of your individuation and your individuality in. Your inner Christos, your individual part of the universal template, of the galactic template, of the planetary template, and of your personal shield setup. You have a direct connection to cosmos, universe, galaxy, planet, and race that you're a part of through your shield programs. You actually have an energy connection between all of those other systems and you through the shields. You have your Maharic shield, and that's what we're going to learn to activate in Kathara Level 1, because the Maharic shield and bringing that back into manual activation. See, they'd be activated normally if D12 frequency was at a critical mass in the planetary grids. You wouldn't have to do it manually. This planet has been in an anti-Christo state for ages now. It's going to take a long time before it's able to even sustain people with a Maharic shield that's fully activated. You'd blow the planet up if you fully activated your Maharic shield, one person. You would actually blow the planet up right now because it's too much frequency. So, a Maharic shield activation, a full 12-strand Maharic shield activation, you'd have 12 strands of DNA fully activated, turned on all the time. You would be a fully focused avatar. But there's considerations. Now, we are all avatars, but what we're learning to do first is to reach those levels of awareness, but not worry about having our 12 strands activated right here, right now, all the time. Because any one of us that does that and was irresponsible enough to do it if we could, would literally blow the planetary grids and destroy the place. So right now, what we're aiming for is 6-strand sustained activation over a 12-year period, which means we have time to get the strands up. It doesn't mean you won't activate higher strands. It means that you will activate them when needed. When you need D12 frequency, you will open and activate the Maharic shield and template and bring D12 frequency current into your body. But you won't just leave it on. It's like leaving the lights on. You know, you can have a very high light bill. No. It's like learning to control how much energy and consciousness you're going to bring in, because you realize that what you do with your systems are going to affect the systems around you. So we're going to learn how to do this. We're going to learn to do the Maharic shield. That is the first and most important core teaching technology of the Kathara program. If you don't do the Maharic seal, like a lot of people learn this just for safety, how to do a Maharic seal for safety purposes, to keep your fields clear, because it's one of the advantages it will give you. But some people say, oh, I remember one lady, bless her, in a workshop. She went through all of this. We got this far at the end. She says, oh, I don't need a Maharic shield. Wait a minute. You know, somehow I haven't gotten this across to the person how important it is. Well, I'm safe. Archangel Michael's protecting me. So I don't care who's protecting you. You still need a Maharic shield. You're saying you don't need your Divine Christos blueprint because you got Archangel Michael. Isn't there a little something wrong with that? Yeah. There's a lot more to a Maharic shield than simply the fact that it brings you protection in the different levels of your auric field. So you have, you know, you can do things more safely, and you can walk in places that are astral messes and they won't attach to you and things. Literally, if you had 12 strands activated, you would have it would imply that your Maharic shield was activated at a full D12 level, and that you would have D12 current running through the body, and that as long as you kept that all turned on, you wouldn't be here. You would be in liquid light right now. What an avatar does is consciously learn to direct what the DNA is doing. It doesn't stay in 12-strand or higher activation all the time, which means it would be out of density all the time. It learns to turn itself off and on. You get to the point where, when you're a fully actualized avatar or rishi or ascendant master, you can choose when you're going to flash yourself on into the hologram and when not to. So you simply will turn the DNA on to a certain level, and you see, DNA is encoded into the template. So whether or not you're having a biological fleshy body with you, you still have a DNA imprint. Rocks have their own type of imprint. that it doesn't look like DNA exactly like biological DNA does, but there is a template that works the same way. So anyway, regenesis. This is what we are going to be doing in Kathara healing. Biological regenesis of the Divine Blueprint Maharic Shield template. We're going to use the Maharic Shield to progressively bring back into the body the original mathematical program upon which you entered manifestation, in order to reset any distortions that you've picked up along the way, not just in this life, but in any of the other 1,728 implied time vectors that you are simultaneously existing in right now. This will be the body that you will transmute any of that mess through. And it doesn't mean you're taking on other people's karma or you're going to have this whole karmic mess come up in your face. The problem is if you don't work to clear these imprints, they are going to activate in your DNA because the planetary grids are activating. People talk about the karmic pattern and, oh, you know, don't ask for fast ascension because somebody up there, the Lords of Karma, will release it fast and they'll make you have, like, destroy your life in 4 days flat as your karmic imprint explodes in your face, right? Well, we teach you how to have that not happen, all right? You will have karma come up, and the race karma is coming up right now. That's why it's going to be crazy in the next 10 years. You're going to watch stuff happen that is like, take a front row seat, because there's going to be stuff going down on this planet in the next 10 to 12 years that have not been here for thousands and thousands of years. It's like, take a front row seat and duck and wear a bulletproof vest, because it's going to be a bit wild. Now,
BS proof vest.
yeah, that too. Yeah, and look out for soothsayers and silver-tongued devils with pretty faces. Yeah, they're popular in the New Age movement. There's a few, let's say, fallen angelics that take on that guise to seduce people into following false ascension mechanics so they can use people's bodies to get to the planetary grids. We'll talk about that in the Templar workshop. Anyway, let's see. Do I need this one? Let me see.
Summarize
Okay,
it.
yes, scalar centers, cosmons, and QAnon code represent primal substance and areas that conflict, and we all know that. Okay. Very good, so good. Such scalar goods, because the seals have been in the dark pipe place.
If you go to each page, could you say what page number it is? That way also when we're tracking on the tapes, we'll know what we've heard.
Yeah, that's a good idea.
Page 34.
Okay, page 30. This is page 34 at the bottom sequence of page numbers, 34. Okay, this is the Universal Templar Complex, where we were talking about the level 1 Kathara 12 tree grid, and we were talking about the shields of the level 2 Kathara grid. The planetary shields, we're talking about planetary level first. The Universal Templar is the one that involves the universal gates and grids, the galactic ones, and even into the planetary. So you have a Universal Templar, you have a Galactic Templar, you have a Planetary Templar, and you have a Personal Templar. They all follow this order, and they all have this structure. Now, the shields, these are the diagrams to represent the shields. There are 4 primary shields that go between Dimension 1 and Dimension 12. So there are 4 shields that connect you to your Christos self. Then there's another 5th shield that connects you to your Rishi self, and another one that connects you into the primal sound, a set of them, that connects you into the Ascended Master's level of identity in the primal sound fields. The first shield is called the Telluric shield. It's the gross matter shield of Dimensions 1, 2, 3, which is density 1. It's one shield. And there are parts, we'll get to other graphs where we show you where these, once they're activated, create energy fields in and around your body when they're activated. Okay? B is a Doratic shield. Dora is a word in Anahazi that refers to the soul. It means soul, and it refers to that very specific part of the consciousness and anatomy that is stationed in Dimensions 4, 5, and 6. It's called the Dora. So the Doratic of the Dora shield is your density 2 shield, Dimensions 4, 5, and 6. The next one, again, the name is Tura, so they call it the Turic shield. Tura is a word that means oversoul, and it also refers to the dimensional field of 7, 8, and 9, which is the etheric matter density. So you have a physical shield, which controls the mathematical program of your D1, 2, 3 parts, which is your physical body here, your mental body, and your physical body, emotional body, and mental body. Okay? They would be controlled by this shield here, shield 1, the Telluric shield. Second shield is your soul shield. You can look at it easily. The Doratic shield is your soul shield. This is the shield that has your Dimension 4, 5, and 6 aspects to consciousness. and that would be your astral identity, and what's called your archetypal identity, your archetype, and your celestial or angelic mind identity. All right, so there's parts of mind that go with this too, parts of your own identity. We have the lower mind would be D3 here, the middle mind would be D6 here, the higher mind would be D9 here, the avatar mind would be, the Christed mind would be D12 up there. The second levels of them correspond to the emotional level of the bodies. So you have a lower emotional, mid-emotional, higher emotional, Christos emotional. The emotional are also the parts that are connected to the elements. So they correspond directly to the elements of molecules that you're made out of, that your physical body is made out of. And below that, you have the things that the elements themselves are made out of, which are subatomic units and quarks and all sorts of little neat little things that are that stage between it wasn't manifest, now it is, and it's not something solid yet, and it's not a compound yet. It's not fully atomic yet. Okay? So these pertain to not only understanding how stargates operate, because when we get into the Templar class, these diagrams will be used to explain things about the planetary and universal Templar, but they're also things that directly correspond to you and your body. The Maharic shield, which is this one, this is the one we're going to be activating, because with the dimensions, the way dimensions are structured, dimension 1, or dimension 12, I'll start at the top. Dimension 12 holds all the mathematical programs of every dimension below it. That's how the dimensions work. That's how the currents work. That's why D12 frequency, once it's activated in the body, drawn through all the shields, will literally reset the mathematical coding all the way down through to the original divine blueprint. So the lower dimension is, the ones higher than it control it. Works the same way with stargates. Works the same way with Cathara centers and DNA strands. When we get into DNA, we'll talk about the Cathara grid, and each one of these holds each one of the Cathara centers in the 12-tree grid holds the mathematical program for one of the 12 strands. So if you want to help heal on strand 3, which corresponds to your D3 mental body, you would want to run energy into Cathara center 3. That also corresponds to chakra 3. There's a direct relationship. This is really a simple system. Once you get the basics down, it's very simple. You have a connection in your bodies that goes between Cathara centers into shields, that goes also into Merkaba levels that we'll talk about probably tomorrow. It'll be at the Merkaba levels. That goes right into your chakra systems, your axiotonal lines, which are vertical lines that run through the system. It's all connected, and it's connected through the numbers. Numbers alone have their own importance in mathematical sequencing. Numbers are symbols also that stand for energy signatures and energy commands. So the numbering on here isn't random. The numbering that you'll see, it goes through everything. The DNA templates 1 through 12 correspond to the Cathara grids 1 through 12, correspond to the chakras 1 through 12. And when we get into the higher ones, we're dealing with 13, 14, and 15 in the primal sound fields. There's other sets of information that go with that as well. But the system is really quite simple. You know, if you want to work on DNA strand 3, you go for chakra 3. That's where you would want to induce one of the symbol programs that you might be working with, and that would take it right in through the shield that corresponded to 3. Now remember, shields are 3-dimensional. So if you're working on strand 3, you'd have this. There are 3 what are called signets in every shield. They're consolidated points of frequency that control the shield itself. So this whole shield is built on a mathematical program that's held within these 3 points, the whole mathematical program. And those 3 points correspond to these 3 points. So these 3 things here are actually the core mathematical programs in the shields, and from there, the diversification of those mathematical programs comes out. So if you were going to work to fix strand 3, and to work on your mental body, for instance, you would work with Cathara center 3. That would take you right into the telluric shield, which is shield A, because that's the dimension 1, 2, and 3 level. And you would run frequency through chakra 3, which connects you to that level. And that the chakras literally are where your consciousness flows through that dimensional field. So your mental body is a part of D3. And where you are here is your lower mental body. And it's not meaning lower bad. It's meaning just lower than the higher density levels. So there's a direct correspondence between all of these. The one that's not shown on here is the Rishik shield. That's the 5th one. That's the antimatter shield, which is like a shield of standing light. That corresponds to dimensions 13, 14, and 15 of your identity. But first we're going to work on the first 12 levels, because you have to open those currents in your body before you can even get to the Rishik shield. So we're going to be working with, and probably after lunch today, we're going to go into technique. There's several techniques that are associated with beginning to open these frequencies in the body and helping yourself to do so. There's a technique called the mentor, which is the beginning of a technique that has to do with much more than just putting a part of yourself over here to talk to. That's what we do in the mentor exercise. We'll get into that, when we come back from lunch. But anyway, these are the basic structures of universal order, and they are the same structures that you will find are in your bodies, and we'll continue to go through this where we find where in the bodies these parts are located, because it helps to understand the map to your own body and your own subtle bodies. What do we have here?
This is for our purposes down to summarise now, because the next page is actually we're into the summary of the chapter, transduction sequence of the
Yeah,
summary.
I really wanted to show the before lunch the bodies, where the stuff goes in the body. How far back is that?
In chapter 2.
Let me see.
I'll have to find it.
Okay. I just want to say something, because I'm really dying to show you where these things plug into the physical body, but there's several things I'd have to cover first. There's probably about a half hour to 45 minutes more of presentation before I can have fun and show you where these things plug into the body. Do you want to do it before or after lunch? Good idea. Okay. Good idea. What I will... Yeah, okay, yeah. That's too far to go. Yeah, that's way too far. Okay. So when we get back, you'll find out where these energy structures plug into your physical body, where your Kathara centers are located. We'll explore where your chakras are located, where your crystal seals are located, where your shields are located, because you actually have these things. And it's so fun once you realize you have them, and you realize what you can do to start playing with energy with them. It's like you could lay in a room for a month and just investigate your new parts, and see what they do. Yeah. All right. How is the pace, by the way? Nobody feels overwhelmed or anything like that? Okay. Good. Thank you. Good.